there were many who were severely injured. Just now, Yu Hanyun was in such a state. Ru Xian prayed silently, it's inevitable that the flying sword will explode. I only hope that the heavens will protect little Granduncle Master and ensure that he's fine. Whoosh! Before long, a beam of light shone from the weapon tripod. Everyone was stunned. A dermic pattern was condensed. Ming Han's expression was normal. It was normal for a dermic pattern to be condensed and there was nothing to be surprised about. Not long after, a second beam of light flashed. This meant that 2 dermic patterns had been condensed. Outsiders could not see what was going on inside the weapon tripod. In reality, it was silent inside the weapon tripod. Su Zimo was not condensing dermic patterns at all. Given his nascent soul realm cultivation, it was extremely easy for him to play some tricks in the weapon tripod and create some light. Arikatsuki Michinoku frowned slightly. She felt that something was amiss. However, although she was the master of a sect, she could not use her spirit consciousness to check out the situation inside while others were refining weapons. That would be taboo for weapon refinement masters. In reality, if there was a weapon refinement grandmaster present who was experienced and sharp, Su Zimo's methods would naturally not be able to escape their eyes. Unfortunately, there were no weapon refinement grandmasters at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Whoosh! Before long, a third beam of light flashed. Eh! This time round, even Ming Han exclaimed softly. Of course, he was not nervous. The further one progressed in spirit gathering, the more difficult it was and the lower the chances of success. At the very least, half of the weapon refinement masters present would be able to condense 3 dermic patterns. Just as he was pondering, a fourth beam of light flashed. 4 dermic patterns. This time round, even the crowd was restless. Many cultivators no longer looked down on him. No matter what, a supreme-grade dermic weapon with 4 dermic patterns was already considered a rather brilliant weapon refinement master. After a while, a 5th beam of light burst forth. This time round, the crowd was in an uproar. Even everyone from 100 Refinement sect widened their eyes in disbelief. Nangong Ling and the other 2 were dumbfounded. In their eyes, their little Granduncle Master, who did not even have a weapon tripod with his crude weapon refinement techniques, managed to refine a perfected Lord Dermic weapon with a tattered weapon tripod? Ming Han frowned. He could also sense that something was amiss, but he could not pinpoint what it was. Furthermore, he could already feel the pressure. Mo Ling can't have truly created a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, right? Ming Han narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Zimo, pondering. After an unknown period of time. Whoosh! A bedazzling light burst forth from the weapon tripod once more as dermic powers surged and filled the void. Ah! A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. The 6th dermic pattern lit up and the crowd was shocked. That's impossible. Ming Han's expression was dark as he grit his teeth. How can 6 dermic patterns be that easy? I don't believe it. Ming Han was not the only one who did not believe it. Most of the cultivators present, including everyone from 100 Refinement sect, could not believe it and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Su Zimo did not give the cultivators too much time to react and poured the cold water he prepared into the weapon tripod. Shing! Green smoke billowed. The quenching was complete. In reality, the quenching was to place a red-hot flying sword in cold water. However, the illumination stone was burned by the immortal Dao fire and did not move at all. If he took out his flying sword directly, it would be exposed instantly. The weapon tripod was boiling hot and there would definitely be sizzling sounds when cold water was poured into it. When they saw that, a thought flashed through the minds of the cultivators. This person's quenching technique was indeed different and they did not think too much about it. It was a success. It was finally time for them to see the truth. Looking at the flustered Ming Han not far away, Su Zimo smiled gently. If no one discovered any flaws by now, Ming Han would be the next one to suffer a tragedy. Chapter 946. Where's your flying sword? Take it out and let us all take a look. Ming Han widened his eyes and shouted. Don't be anxious, Su Zimo's expression was calm. After a moment of hesitation, he controlled one of the flying swords and rose slowly from the weapon tripod. If no one could tell that there was a problem with this flying sword, everything would be fine. If anyone could tell that there was a problem, even if he brought out all 36 flying swords, it would only be a joke. Right in front of everyone, a small and exquisite flying sword appeared. It was milky white and looked like a slender silver needle. What's that? How can that be called a flying sword? Ha ha ha, that's clearly an embroidery needle. Did Mo Ling refine an embroidery needle for needlework? The Hellfire Hall cultivators mocked. However, most of the cultivators did not laugh. That was because most of the people present were nascent soul paragons. As long as they focused their gazes, they could tell that although the dermic weapon was small and exquisite, it was indeed in the form of a flying sword. Moreover, 6 veins could be vaguely seen on the sword. Although the dermic weapon was small, it was indeed a connate dermic weapon with 6 dermic patterns. What should we do now? Both of them have refined connate dermic weapons and the title of Weapon Refinement Master can be given to both of them. However, there's no victor between the two of them and the 2 sections. Furthermore, Mo Ling seems to have refined the weapon for a shorter period of time than Ming Han. Many cultivators discussed. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect was excited. They had not expected that the situation would develop to this stage and there would be a turn for the better. Ming Han frowned. He felt that something was amiss but he could not figure out what it was. When he heard the discussions around him, he felt frustrated and his mind was even more chaotic, he could not understand. Even connate dermic weapons have differences in strength. Ming Han sneered, how can that embroidery needle of yours be compared to my flying sword? You'll know after we compete. Su Zimo smiled indifferently and controlled the small and exquisite flying sword to stab towards Ming Han. In the void, a cold light flashed and the flying sword was already close. Ming Han was shocked. Without much time to think, he subconsciously took out the flying sword that he had just refined and slashed at the incoming flying sword. Clang! Ming Han shuddered. His flying sword was actually repelled by this tiny flying sword, and the light on the sword also dimmed significantly. The crowd was moved. If the flying sword was repelled, it was because Ming Han's dermic powers were no match for Su Zimo. The weakening of the light on the sword meant that Ming Han's flying sword was indeed inferior to the small flying sword that Su Zimo had refined. Su Zimo's flying sword hovered in midair, emitting a milky white glow all over its body. As though it could absorb the energy emitted by the blazing sun, it became even more brilliant. The essence of the flying sword was the illumination stone. Even connate dermic weapons would not be able to shake it. Su Zimo cultivated the illumination eye every day with the help of the scorching sun. The scorching sun and the illumination stone had a mysterious connection to begin with, so it was not strange for such a scene to occur. However, in the eyes of many cultivators, it was extremely shocking. Although this flying sword is small, it's truly an eye-opener for it to be able to trigger the radiance of the scorching sun. Seems like Hellfire Hall has lost this weapon refinement battle. The expressions of the cultivators of Heavenly Dipper sect, Chaos Essence sect and Sword sect darkened gradually. If Hellfire Hall lost, they would have no reason to cause trouble for 100 Refinement sect. No matter what happened in the future, at the very least, 100 Refinement sect's crisis was resolved for the 1000 Crane Tea Party. Since they're both connate perfected Lord dermic weapons, why don't we consider it a draw? Right then, perfected Lord Pang Lon of Heavenly Dipper sect said indifferently. Why should we consider it a draw? That's right, Ming Han's flying sword is clearly not a match. That's right, the weapon tripod we used is an ordinary one. The 100 Refinement sect cultivators were filled with anger, how could they let the matter rest? That's enough. Arikatsuki Michinoku stood out at the right time and said indifferently, this weapon refinement battle has indeed been an eye-opener. Since both cultivators have refined Khanate dermic weapons, it should be considered a draw. As for the strength of Khanate dermic weapons, they will naturally be displayed differently in the hands of different cultivators. Both of you are weapon refinement masters. As for supreme grade mystic tea, both of you can share a cup. This matter ends here, there's no need to argue. It was clear that Arakatsuki Michinoku was biased. The 100 Refinement sect cultivators were indignant. Dao Bing Yuding shook his head and gestured for everyone to quieten down. Chiguramon was the host of this tea party. Since even a sect master had said so, there was no point in continuing. Jian Wuzong shouted, "That's right, hurry up and move on to the next segment. It's time to resolve some grudges." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Instantly, countless gazes filled with killing intent and hostility landed on Su Zimo. Countless people wanted to kill Su Zimo at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Alright, Arakatsuki Michinoku nodded. Since that's the case, please enjoy this tea and take a break. Thereafter, we'll move on to the second segment of the tea party, the fight between the paragons. Is he even worthy of sharing a cup of tea with me? Just as everyone thought that the matter had come to an end, Su Zimo spoke slowly and sneered. Do you have any objections? Arakatsuki Michinoku narrowed her gaze and looked indignant. Su Zimo's repeated provocations had already enraged her and she had only been restraining herself. I don't have any objections, Su Zimo said indifferently, however, the outcome of this weapon refinement battle is the clearest. Thereafter, he waved his hand gently and a large number of milky white flying swords rose slowly from the weapon tripod that was floating in midair. There were a total of 35 swords. Even before this, there were 36 flying swords that were identical without any difference. The 36 flying swords shone brightly with the blazing sun above their heads, emitting a milky white glow that intensified in a bedazzling manner. Pust! A series of gasps could be heard from the crowd. That scene was way too shocking. Even the 3 Dharma characteristic Tao lords present had their mouths agape and eyes widened as they watched this scene in disbelief. What, the F***ck is that? This person refined a total of 36 flying swords and all of them are Khanate dermic weapons? It's not only 36 Khanate dermic weapons, they're all identical. He refined an entire set of flying swords. That's way too terrifying. Heavens! How can such methods be done by humans? It was already shocking enough that a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon was refined. But now, Su Zimo threw out a huge pile of them. The visual and mental impact was indescribable. The crowd was dumbfounded and their jaws were about to drop to the ground. What's the background of this person? It's already a blessing from the heavens for others to painstakingly refine a Khanate dermic weapon. Yet, this guy is mass-producing it. What's there to compete for? Ming Han is way too weak. As though he was struck by lightning, Ming Han fell to the ground limply with widened eyes. His mind was blank as he shook his head repeatedly. Impossible, impossible. The consecutive blows had already left him in a daze. Chapter 947. When Su Zimo saw that the situation was settled, he waved his hand gently and put away the 36 flying swords. No matter what, his flying swords were not Khanate dermic weapons after all. If they were exposed for too long, there was no guarantee that nothing would happen. Even if the 36 flying swords were gathered together, they were not that big. Su Zimo held them in his palm and wiped his glabella carelessly. The 36 flying swords had already entered his right eye silently. Even if 100 Refinement sect wins this weapon refinement battle, it doesn't mean anything. The person who spoke was seated at the front of Hellfire Hall. He was the only void reversion from Hellfire Hall for this trip and his Dao title was Refinement Peak. Everyone knew that Hellfire Hall's words meant that they had admitted defeat. Dao being Refinement Peak's expression darkened as he said slowly, no one from 100 Refinement sect can defeat our Hall Master in the Weapon Refinement Grandmaster competition. Not necessarily, Su Zimo said indifferently, if Hellfire Hall is indignant, 100 Refinement sect will naturally look for you after the tea party. I'm just afraid that Hellfire Hall won't dare to accept the challenge. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect felt guilty. They knew very well that no one in the sect could surpass the Hellfire Hall's Hall Master in terms of weapon refinement. The reason why Su Zimo dared to say such words was naturally because of Haka-Adojin. After the tea party, Haka-Adojin would reconstruct his body and return domineeringly. Given his accomplishments in weapon refinement, he would definitely not lose to the Hellfire Hall's Hall Master. Alright, let's wait and see. Dao Bing Refinement Peak sneered. Su Zimo returned the weapon tripod to Nangong Ling before turning around and looking at Arikatsuki Michinoku, who was not far away. Senior, the outcome of this weapon refinement battle should be clear. Please bestow the tea, Senior. Arikatsuki Michinoku was extremely unwilling. However, at that moment, she naturally could not break the rules set by Chiguramon in front of everyone. Taking a deep breath, Arikatsuki Michinoku calmed his mind and slowly said, tea. Very quickly, a steaming cup of top-grade mystic tea was handed to Su Zimo. On the other hand, the Dharma characteristic elder of Thousand Cranes sect was friendly towards Su Zimo and nodded with a smile. This tea should be drunk while it's hot. Drink it in one go and use your essence spirit to comprehend the mysteries within. Thank you, Senior. Su Zimo received the supreme grade mystic tea but did not drink it. Instead, he returned to the front of 100 Refinement sect's formation with a teacup. Drink up. Under the suffocating gazes of countless people, Su Zimo actually handed the top-grade mystic tea to Yu Hanyan. The crowd was moved. One had to know that the true focus of the Thousand Crane Tea Party was the mystic tea. The nascent soul realm prodigies of the middle ground gathered here just to drink a cup of mystic tea. Even the ordinary mystic tea was a great opportunity and supreme glory. Furthermore, there were only 5 cups of supreme-grade mystic tea. To be precise, there were only 2 cups left of the tea party, including the one in Su Zimo's hands. But now, he had actually given away the supreme-grade mystic tea. Isn't Mo Ling way too extravagant? The moment he attacked, he gave away a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon. Now, he's even giving away supreme-grade mystic tea. No way, I've already fallen for him. A Chiguramon female cultivator whispered with an infatuated expression. Another female cultivator murmured as well, this is truly unbearable. If it was me, I would have fainted from happiness long ago when that supreme-grade mystic tea was handed over. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect widened their eyes in shock as well. Many people looked at Su Zimo and Yu Hanyan with strange expressions. Could it be that this great beauty of the 100 Refinement sect was already taken? Ru Xian was a little envious but also a little upset. Nangong Ling's expression darkened as well. As time passed by, he realized that the gap between him and his little granduncle master was getting wider and wider, to the point of being unreachable. Yu Hanyan was probably the only one who knew that Su Zimo did not have any romantic feelings for her. Don't think too much, Su Zimo said softly. Hanyan failed in spirit gathering and her essence spirit is injured. It's difficult for her to recover fully. This supreme-grade mystic tea can heal her essence spirit. Ru Xian and Nangong Ling's hearts skipped a beat. They could tell that Su Zimo was saying that to them. Relieved, Nangong Ling smiled foolishly and turned to Yu Hanyan. That's right. After drinking this tea, there's a high chance that your essence spirit injuries will recover immediately. But, you were the one who won this cup of tea, Granduncle Master. Yu Hanyan's eyes were red as she choked. It's all thanks to you that the sect's reputation was preserved. I'm not worthy of drinking this tea. You're thinking too much. In the sect, you're the only one who's qualified to drink this tea. Su Zimo smiled gently and placed the supreme-grade mystic tea in Yu Hanyan's palm, saying unquestionably, drink it. Don't feel pressured. He was not trying to comfort Yu Hanyan. The reason why he was able to win the weapon refinement competition was entirely because he was opportunistic and did not rely on his true skills in weapon refinement. In 100 Refinement Sect, only Yu Hanyan was qualified to drink this tea. Drink it. Even little Granduncle Master said so. Nangong Ling persuaded with a smile as well. Yu Hanyan still shook her head. There's only 1 cup of supreme grade mystic tea. If you give it to me, Granduncle Master won't have it anymore. Yu Hanyan said. Granduncle Master is also at the nascent soul realm. This supreme grade mystic tea is extremely important to him as well. Who said that there's only 1 cup of supreme grade mystic tea? Su Zimo smiled gently and pointed to the only remaining tender green tea leaves on the tip of the mystic tea tree. There's still 1 more cup. Ah! Nangong Ling and the other 2 were stunned before their expressions changed. Everyone knew that the remaining cup was reserved for the final victor of the Paragon competition, the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent. Could little Granduncle Master's words mean? Nangong Ling sent a voice transmission hurriedly. Little Granduncle Master, don't be rash. Our 100 Refinement Sects trip is complete and there's no need to cause any more trouble. 100 Refinement Sects matter is over, but my matter has only just begun. Su Zimo patted Nangong Ling on the shoulder and said softly, neither you nor 100 Refinement Sect should get involved in what happens next. Before Nangong Ling and the others could react, Su Zimo had already turned around and said word by word, I want this last cup of supreme grade mystic tea. The crowd was in an uproar. A declaration of war. That sentence was a blatant declaration of war. How dare you? Yi Tiancheng sat on his throne motionlessly and said coldly with killing intent in his eyes. Splash! The 9 WIRMS were about to charge forward with rumbling demonic chi as the gigantic chains on their bodies let out a shuddering sound. The remaining 8 maidservants beside him glared at Su Zimo coldly. Is it finally here? Perfected Lord Pang Lon of Heavenly Dipper Sect said with a smile, and a cold glint flashed through his eyes. Clang! Jian Wuzong could not hold it in any longer and drew his sword right away. With a cold glint, he glared fiercely at Su Zimo and was prepared to charge forward at any moment to avenge his previous humiliation. This time round, he wielded his sword first. He did not listen to Hang Qiuyu's instructions at all. He was 3rd on the phenomenon ranking. Although Hang Qiuyu was his senior brother, Hang Qiuyu was only ranked 8th on the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago and had even lost to an unknown sword cultivator. In Jian Wuzong's heart, Hang Qiuyu was inferior to him. Clang! 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 The sound of sharp blades being unsheathed sounded. Many paragons stood up with surging battle intent. The fight between the paragons was about to begin. Chapter 948. Looking at Su Zimo's back view, Nangong Ling and the other 2 exchanged glances with complicated expressions. For some reason, the 3 of them felt that there seemed to be another meaning behind Su Zimo's words just now. The 3 of them were right. Su Zimo's words were to draw a clear line between him and 100 Refinement Sect. If he were to fight with the paragons, there was a high chance that he would not be able to hide his identity. He did not want to cause too much trouble for 100 Refinement Sect. How arrogant! Let's see what happens to you. Who do you think you are? There's only 1 cup of supreme grade mystic tea and you think you can have it just because you want it. Fufu, only the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent is qualified to have supreme grade mystic tea. You're not worthy. There was no need for Yi Tiancheng to say anything. Many nascent soul paragons present could not hold it in and stood out to mock him. In their hearts, there were only a few people who were qualified to be the number 1 perfected lord. What was Mo Ling? Furthermore, Su Zimo's tone made the nascent soul paragons extremely displeased. If Yi Tiancheng were the one who said that, they would be displeased and endure it. Mo Ling was unknown previously and only rose to fame in the past month. Most cultivators had not heard of him and were naturally indignant. Little Granduncle Master, even if you want to participate in the Paragon fight, you should take a break. Nangong Ling hurriedly sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness and reminded, "You've just participated in the weapon refinement competition and must have expended a lot of mental energy. It's not good for you to start a fight now." At the same time, perfected Lord Pang Lon chuckled and shook his head. He's a young man after all. He can't control his temper. "Senior brother, what do you mean?" a cultivator asked. Perfected Lord Pang Lon said resolutely, "This lad has just refined so many connate dermic weapons and expended a lot of energy. Now that he's in a hurry to challenge Yi Tiancheng, he's undoubtedly courting death. I'm willing to bet that this person will be exhausted to death by the other paragons before Yi Tiancheng even makes a move." How good was Su Zimo's hearing? Even though perfected Lord Pang Lan's voice was as soft as a mosquito and could not be heard clearly in the noisy crowd, he could hear it clearly. However, his expression was calm and he didn't care at all. That was because the situation that Nangong Ling and perfected Lord Pang Lan were worried about did not exist. Just now, he was just putting on an act and didn't consume anything at all. Arakatsuki Michinoku stood up slowly and said in a deep voice, "Since everyone can't wait any longer, I will now announce the official start of the prodigy battle." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Zimo turned around and pointed at Yi Tiancheng, who was sitting high up on the throne, and said slowly, "Get down here." The crowd was shocked. What was this? Did Imo Ling want to challenge the #1 perfected monarch, Yi Tiancheng? Did this person think that he had lived a long life and couldn't wait to die? Yi Tiancheng sat motionlessly on the throne and looked down at Su Zimo coldly with disdain. Since he had already reached this point, he was no longer in a hurry. In his eyes, Su Zimo was already a dead man. Or rather, there was no need for him to do it personally. Foo-foo. What a joke. Who do you think you are to challenge my master? The two maidservants beside Yi Tiancheng pouted their lips and sneered. Ha 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 ha. This Mo Ling doesn't even know the rules of the prodigy battle and he's jumping out to die. How interesting. A burst of laughter sounded from the crowd. Oh. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and asked, "What are the rules of the prodigy battle?" Arakatsuki Michinoku said in a deep voice, "Apart from the #1 of the phenomenon ranking, Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan, all the other contestants have to fight. The other paragons will have to fight in pairs until the final 2 victors are decided before they can challenge Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan." Yi Tiancheng grinned. "In other words, you're not even qualified to challenge me." Su Zimo frowned and looked at Arakatsuki Michinoku. "If I want to fight against Yi Tiancheng, I have to fight my way up step by step with the other paragons." "That's right," Arakatsuki Michinoku nodded. "Otherwise, wouldn't Yi Tiancheng be annoyed to death if everyone wants to challenge him?" "Oh, got it," Su Zimo nodded with an indifferent expression. He surveyed his surroundings and said indifferently, "I'm going to cripple Yi Tiancheng now. Anyone who wants to stop me can come up. There's no need for a one-on-one duel. Anyone who's not convinced can come up at any time. I'll take them all on." The crowd was in an uproar. Is that person crazy? He wants to suppress all the paragons present single-handedly. I think he's truly deluded himself into being the #1 perfected lord and wants to sweep through all the paragons present. He truly doesn't know what's good for him. Not to mention the other cultivators, even the people from 100 Refinements sect were stunned on the spot. Little Granduncle Master must be crazy. Nangong Ling shook her head repeatedly and murmured repeatedly. Even Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan would not dare to claim that he could suppress all the paragons present single-handedly. To be precise, apart from Leng Ro, Little Fatty, and the others who knew about Su Zimo's background, almost no one present thought highly of him. Of course, there were a few cultivators who frowned in deep thought and reserved their opinions. Among them was Hang Qiuyu of Sword Sect. Jian Wuzong reared his head in laughter and grit his teeth. This person is extremely arrogant and treats the heroes of the world as nothing. He's courting death. Not necessarily, Hang Qiuyu shook his head. At the very least, in his memories, there was once such a monster incarnate who dared to make such bold claims and possessed such strength. He would never forget that person for the rest of his life. That figure had shocked him way too much in the two ancient battlefields. Fairy Luo Shui, the only void reversion of Snowdrift Valley for this trip, looked at the green figure and murmured softly, "What boldness! If that person isn't crazy, that boldness alone is enough to fight for the title of #1 perfected lord." Arikatsuki Michinoku pondered for a moment and reminded, "In the fight between the paragons, you're not allowed to fight to the death or target the essence spirit." There was a commotion and everyone was raging. There were already many nascent soul paragons who could not hold back and wanted to charge forward to fight Suzimo. In reality, there were not many paragons of the major sects and factions of the Middle Continent who truly had a feud with Suzimo. At that moment, there were many nascent soul paragons who were tempted. Apart from some who were indignant and wanted to teach Suzimo a lesson, most of them had their eyes on Suzimo's treasures. In the fight between the paragons, they were not allowed to fight to the death. However, there were no restrictions or rules that forbade them from fighting for the other party's treasures. If they could defeat Suzimo, everyone would naturally have a legitimate reason to attack and snatch all the treasures on Suzimo. That included the 36 Khanate flying swords that were revealed just now. In the eyes of the cultivators, Suzimo was a massive treasure trove that was waiting for everyone to fight for it. Many cultivators glared at Suzimo with greed in their eyes. Suzimo's gaze was cold as he sensed the intentions of the paragons and said slowly, "Don't blame me for not reminding you guys. In the fight between the paragons, you're not allowed to fight to the death. However, I'll be extremely heavy-handed. The person I want to cripple is Yi Tiancheng. Those who have nothing to do with it had better not come looking for trouble." Chapter 949. How arrogant! I've long been pissed at you. An upper sect of the Middle Continent, a paragon of Peach Blossom Peak, stood out and strode towards Suzimo, shouting, "I'm perfected Lord Tianliang. Come and meet." Before that person could finish his sentence, he felt a green figure flash before his eyes. Bang! Before he could react, he received a tremendous impact on his chest and was sent flying, spitting out blood. The person laid motionlessly on the ground. Although his essence spirit was fine, the bones in his chest were shattered by Suzimo's punch and he fainted on the spot from the unbearable pain. This nascent soul realm prodigy of Peach Blossom Peak had only shown his face and said half a sentence before he was completely annihilated in the crowd. "I heard that you're a sword cultivator as well. I'm Yen Ling of Unparalleled Sword Sect. I'm willing to spar with you." A sword cultivator rushed out from the crowd. Before he even got close, he had already drawn his sword. The sword beam was chilling. When the sword approached, it split into two and pierced Suzimo's eyes with a sharp sword chi. Unparalleled Sword Sect was also one of the upper sects of the Middle Continent. Sword techniques were known for their variety and craftiness. This sword Dao was unparalleled and could be considered as one of the secret skills of the sect. If one was caught off guard, it was easy to be injured. Suzimo narrowed his eyes. Even if you were to break through this sword technique, it was nothing more than an illusion. Although they looked like two long swords, only one of them was real. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness all year round, Suzimo's vision was terrifying. Even without circulating his illumination dragon eye, he could see the flaws in this sword technique. Suzimo did not dodge or retreat. Extending his finger, he flicked gently towards one of the incoming swords. Clang! The tip of his finger and sword collided. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The true body of the sword appeared and vibrated. Yen Ling's expression changed. Even though Suzimo had merely flicked his fingers casually, Yen Ling was the only one who could sense the terrifying power that burst forth from it. His palm was torn and blood gushed out. Yen Ling lost his grip on the long sword and it flew out of his hand. Just as he was about to withdraw and retreat, Suzimo had already taken the initiative to rush in. Sticking close to him, he leaned lightly against him. Yan Ling felt as if a towering mountain had crashed into his body. His bones and tendons felt like they were about to break. He floated up and fell heavily onto the ground, fainting. In 2 moves, he had defeated 2 sky prides in a row. Swish! Swish! Another 5 silhouettes appeared, occupying 5 different positions. Their feet moved in a mysterious manner as they circled around Su Zimo. These 5 were the prodigies of the 5 Elements sect. When they had just arrived at Chigurumon, Su Zimo had a conflict with the disciples of the 5 Elements sect. Now, when the 5 Elements sect heard that Su Zimo wanted to suppress the paragons on his own, they immediately activated the 5 Elements formation and surrounded him. Arrogant brat, I want to see how long you can last in this 5 Elements formation. A 5 Elements sect paragon said coldly. The 5 Elements formation was activated. Within the formation, anything that had anything to do with the 5 elements, be it weapons or dermic arts, would be weakened limitlessly. Furthermore, as the formation changed, the power of their dermic arts would increase exponentially as well. What 5 elements formation? Break! Su Zimo sneered and suddenly stomped the ground. Boom! The entire ground shook violently. The 5 paragons were alarmed and shuddered, nearly falling. At the same time, there was a slight pause in the activation of the formation. For others, it was difficult to capture that fleeting opening. However, who was Su Zimo? The strongest monster incarnate in history. In his eyes, that opening was the difference between victory and death. One of the 5 Elements sect paragons had just stabilized himself and wanted to continue channeling the formation when Su Zimo had already closed in and roared. That person felt his mind rumble as though he was struck by lightning and was stunned. That was because Su Zimo held back. Otherwise, if Su Zimo used Thunderclap kill at this distance, that person's essence spirit would have been killed on the spot. Su Zimo pressed his palm gently against that person's chest. Snap! That person's chest caved in deeply and he spat out blood, fainting on the spot. Now that one of them was severely injured, the 5 elements formation could no longer operate. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived before the 5 elements sect cultivators and sent the remaining 4 paragons flying with a few punches and kicks. The paragons of the upper sects were as weak as infants in his hands. That person's physique is extremely strong and his melee combat is terrifying. Don't engage him in melee combat. A nascent soul paragon reminded loudly. Immediately after, more than 10 paragons stood out. However, they did not approach Su Zimo and merely stood far away, conjuring dermic arts and controlling their dermic weapons. Swoosh! 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 Dermic weapons tore through the air one after another. Many paragons no longer held back and used their trump cards right away. Rumble! Boom! Boom! Many dermic arts descended, blanketing the skies with a terrifying might. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as his hands changed continuously, conjuring a mysterious hand seal. He opened his mouth slightly and hollered softly, "Pa!" Instantly, Sanskrit descended and the world went silent. Su Zimo lowered his gaze with a dignified expression. A sacred and flawless Buddhist light burst forth from his body and illuminated all living beings. The Daming Dermic Seal was released together with the Daming Mantra. The power of that Dermic Seal was released to its limits. Furthermore, this was the only defensive Dermic Seal among the 6 Daming Dermic Seals, the immovable Foundation Seal. Many dermic arts descended and dissipated the moment they collided with the Buddhist light without causing any ripples. Many dermic weapons froze in midair as well, trembling slightly and unable to pierce down. Su Zimo was motionless as he conjured a dermic seal and dispelled the attacks of more than 10 paragons. When the monks of the 3 major Buddhist monasteries saw that, their expressions changed and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Among them, many of them had already recognized the origin of that dermic seal. Normally speaking, the Daming True Sutra had already been lost. It was said that the cultivators who revealed that Dermic seal recently were two people who appeared 100 years ago. One of them was the top of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago and the other was the fifth on the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago. He was a young monk who joined Dipamkara monastery later on. But now, that top cultivation technique of the Buddhist monasteries appeared in the hands of another cultivator. Arakatsuki Michinoku narrowed his eyes and glared at Suzimo, sweeping his spirit consciousness across the latter. Finally, Arakatsuki Michinoku noticed something amiss. Patriarch, what's wrong? Arakatsuki Michinoku shook his head and did not say anything, merely frowning in deep thought. Right then, Ming Han of Hellfire Hall seemed to have thought of something and charged forward like a maniac. He shouted with a menacing expression, I got it, I got it. Just now, those 36 flying swords of yours are not Khanate Dermic weapons at all. Instead, Suzimo swept his gaze and conjured hand seals. A ball of golden flames had already condensed on his fingertips and floated towards Ming Han. Buddhist Tao fire. Before Ming Han could finish, he saw a ball of golden flames floating over and was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly condensed a hellfire spear and pierced towards the golden flames. Shing! Against the golden flames, the hellfire spear could not resist at all and was extinguished instantly, turning into nothingness. Before Ming Han could react, Suzimo had already rushed forward and gripped his throat, whispering into his ear with a voice transmission, "You know too much." Snap! Ming Han's throat was crushed by Suzimo. Although his essence spirit was still around, the shattered throat of his body was equivalent to being crippled. Chapter 950. Ming Han's words did not garner much suspicion. The cultivators merely thought that he was spouting nonsense because he could not take the consecutive blows and broke down mentally. The nascent soul paragons did not retreat as they controlled their dermic weapons and conjured dermic arts, preparing to attack Suzimo once more. Whoosh! 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 More than 10 nascent soul paragons closed in, ready to take advantage of the situation. Ni! Suzimo conjured hand seals and chanted Sanskrit. Boom! Golden light filled the skies. A gigantic golden palm tore through the firmaments and covered the skies, descending suddenly. The palm patterns on the golden palm were clear and shone with a blinding golden light, suppressing the dozens of nascent soul paragons in midair with a majestic aura. Kill! Many nascent soul paragons attacked one after another and turned their dermic weapons to stab at the golden palm. Clang! 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 Many dermic weapons stabbed the palm and sparks flew, they could not shake that sacred and mighty palm at all. Even when many dermic arts struck it, there were no ripples. It was the immortal trap seal of the Daming Dermic seal. After Suzimo advanced to the nascent soul realm, he channeled the Daming Dermic seal with his essence spirit. Coupled with the Daming mantra and Mingwang prayer beads, its power was already at its limits. Rumble! The golden palm continued to suppress. Hurry, dodge! Many cultivators saw that the situation was bad and wanted to break free from the range of the golden palm. However, the 5 fingers of the golden palm had already begun to bend and close, as though it was forming a cage. The immortal trap seal could even trap true immortals. No matter how the cultivators tried to escape, they could not break free from the cage formed by the 5 golden fingers. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. They could have escaped if they took a step forward. However, no matter how they tried to escape, they could not break free. They could only watch helplessly as the 5 fingers closed continuously, clenching the dozens of nascent soul paragons together and exerting force. Squeezed together, the dozens of paragons were gripped by the gigantic golden palm and closed continuously. The crowd was shocked when they saw that. Ah! Finally, a paragon could not hold it in any longer and shrieked hysterically with a horrified expression. Poof! Poof! Puff! Against the immense pressure, blood mist burst out from the bodies of many cultivators as their bones were crushed. Figures fell to the ground one after another. Although they didn't die, their bodies were severely injured. It would be difficult for them to recover in the future. In the blink of an eye, dozens of nascent soul realm paragons were defeated. The onlookers were shocked. Jinying Jinjuan, who had been eager to make a move, stopped in his tracks. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. He was hesitant and did not dare to move forward. Powerful. Ruthless. Decisive in killing. Looking at the azure figure at the center of the battlefield, this was the only thought left in the minds of many cultivators. Just now, every Jinying Jinjuan who went up had a miserable ending. A broken arm or leg was already considered a minor injury. Some of the cultivators' bodies were completely crippled. Jinying Jinjuan, who had originally wanted to take advantage of the situation to make things difficult for him, was stunned to the spot. He did not dare to act rashly. Isn't that person a sword cultivator? How does he know Buddhist dermic arts? What dermic art is that? It doesn't seem to belong to the 6 Buddhist monasteries. Why is it so terrifying? Is that person really going to defeat all the paragons single-handedly? The initial arrogance of the crowd was completely suppressed by Su Zimo's thunderous methods. Yi Tiancheng sat on his throne with an indifferent expression. Fu, perfected Lord Pang Lan, smiled indifferently and was indifferent. Although Su Zimo's methods were indeed powerful and shocking, they were not enough to threaten him. Furthermore, they were clear about one thing. The dozens of nascent soul paragons that Su Zimo defeated were nothing in their eyes and could be suppressed with ease. That was because true paragons were prideful. In front of everyone, true paragons could not be bothered to join forces with others. Furthermore, monster incarnates like him and Yi Tiancheng were famous. If they joined forces with others, even if they defeated Su Zimo, it would be an unfair victory. They could not afford to lose face. At that moment, all the cultivators were stunned by Su Zimo's sharp methods and did not dare to advance. Jian Wuzong sneered and finally stood out. When he saw that, perfected Lord Pang Lan smiled gently. You want to challenge us? The test has only just begun. Jian Wuzong, don't go. Hang Qiuyu frowned and reminded him with a voice transmission. Humph. Jian Wuzong harumphed and asked instead, why? Senior brother, are you going to help me retrieve the startling dermic sword? There's no hurry. Hang Qiuyu said in a deep voice, that person's background, Fufu. Before Hang Qiuyu could finish, he was interrupted by Jian Wuzong's cold laughter. Senior brother, I think you're just going to stand by and watch me make a fool of myself, right? I'll retrieve the sword that I lost personally. You don't have to care. Jian Wuzong said coldly. He held the long sword in his hand and walked towards Su Zimo without looking back. Prepare to attack. Kill this person at all costs. Yi Tiancheng sent a voice transmission expressionlessly. The 8 maidservants beside him nodded. The third on the phenomenon ranking, Jian Wuzong, is here to avenge his previous humiliation. Previously, Jian Wuzong did not have a sword in hand and did not display his true strength. This time round, we'll be able to see who's stronger. Amidst the discussions of the cultivators, Jian Wuzong walked towards Su Zimo step by step. He wielded his sword casually and sparks flashed as the tip of the sword sliced across the ground. Jian Wuzong looked lazy and was filled with flaws. However, no one dared to underestimate him. That was because no one knew when Jian Wuzong would attack. When he attacked, it would definitely be earth-shattering. The distance between the two of them closed continuously. One was still and the other was moving. The air seemed to have frozen and was suffocating. All of a sudden, an incomparably dazzling sword beam appeared and pierced towards Su Zimo's throat in an instant. It was like a bolt of lightning that tore through the night sky. It was too fast. That was the only thought left in everyone's minds. Many paragons thought instinctively. If they were in his shoes, they would not be able to react to that sword strike. Even Arikatsuki Michinoku's eyes lit up. It was no wonder why he was third on the phenomenon ranking. There were probably less than 10 Jinying Jinjuan present who could defend against that single sword strike. In fact, there might even be fewer. At the same time, 8 figures moved beside Yi Tiancheng. Yi played her flute. The bitter sound of the flute sounded in a mournful manner, causing one to feel uneasy. Yi Si scattered flowers. Petals fell with a chilling killing intent. Yi Wu fanned her fan. A strong wind howled and sand and rocks flew. In a flash, Yi Er, Yi San, Yi Lu, Yi Ba and Yi Jiu summoned their dermic weapons, short swords, silver needles and curved sabers, and charged forward. The timing of the 8 maidservants' attacks was perfect. They sealed off all of Su Zimo's escape routes. There was no way to retreat. At that moment, Jian Wuzong had just attacked. Against that sword strike, everyone had to focus and wait as though they were facing an abyss. They had no other energy. However, the attack of the 8 maidservants was equivalent to pushing Su Zimo into the abyss. Perfected Lord Pang Lan retracted his smile. If it was just a single sword strike from Jian Wuzong, he could still receive it. However, even he would not be able to escape unscathed against this encirclement. Chapter 951. Ling Ro, Little Fatty, and the others became nervous. After all, they had not seen each other for 100 years and did not know how strong Su Zimo's combat strength was. Ling Ro looked at the startling dermic sword in her hands and suddenly regretted it. Just now, if she returned the Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon to Su Zimo, it might be of some use at this critical juncture. But now, Su Zimo stood on the spot bare-handed. Jian Wuzong's sword was already at his throat. At this distance, it was already too late for Su Zimo to take out his dermic weapon from his storage bag. Furthermore, Yi Tiancheng's 8 maidservants had already surrounded him and sealed off all his escape routes. Arrogant fellow, let's see where you can hide. Yi Jiu said hatefully with a cold gaze. A look of joy flashed through Jian Wuzong's eyes as well. It was as though he could see Su Zimo's throat being pierced by his sword the next moment. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. His laughter was loud and deafening. Jian Wuzong frowned slightly. Suddenly, he noticed that even in the face of such a siege, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with mockery instead of panic. Thereafter, Su Zimo said indifferently, "If I can snatch your sword once, I can do it a second time." He was the strongest monster incarnate in history. He had no intention of dodging against such an attack. There was no need for that either. Before he could finish his sentence, Su Zimo suddenly attacked. His entire arm was soft and flung out with a thud. It was like the trunk of a primordial divine elephant as it rested on the incoming sword. One coil and one tremble. Ah! Jian Wuzong exclaimed. He sensed an extremely terrifying power that distorted and trembled before suddenly erupting. His palm could not grip the sword at all. The sword trembled and his palm was torn. Blood seeped out of the muscles on his arm. In the blink of an eye, the sword flew out of his hand. It was actually snatched away by Su Zimo. No one could clearly see what happened when the two of them clashed. Even Jian Wuzong himself did not know. Everyone only knew that in the blink of an eye, the sword had changed hands. No one could understand the fear in Jian Wuzong's heart. Although his current sword was not a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon, it was still a perfect dermic weapon that was incomparably sharp and could slice through metal like mud. It was hard for him to imagine that someone of the same level as him could actually snatch his sword away with their bare hands. Such means and such a powerful physical body had already exceeded his understanding. At that moment, there was only one thought in Jian Wuzong's mind. Run! Jian Wuzong did not hesitate to retreat when his sword was snatched away. Immediately after, he felt an extremely terrifying aura that made his scalp tingle. Su Zimo put 2 fingers together on his left hand and formed a sword finger. Then, he casually slashed in his direction. Chi! A sword chi burst forth from Su Zimo's fingertip. It was white and bedazzling. Instantly, the world shook and the weather changed. Heaven-slaying sword art. The snatching of the sword and counterattack happened at almost the same time. Even all the cultivators in the mystic courtyard felt a shuddering killing intent that emitted a bone-chilling chill, let alone Jian Wuzong. Pust. The crowd sucked in a cold breath. What a terrifying sword chi. Apart from sword sect, was there such a terrifying sword art in Tianhuang mainland? I've got it. Heavenly Dipper Ching Peng was crippled by that sword chi. Someone exclaimed. Initially, Dao Lord Pang Lan had the intention of watching the show. However, after the sword chi burst forth, he felt a chill run down his spine. Instinctively, Dao Lord Pang Lan sat upright with a grim expression. Arikatsuki Michinoku's expression changed slightly and she narrowed her eyes. She was the Dharma Daojun and her cultivation realm was far superior to everyone else's, she could sense it more clearly. It was clear that Mo Ling had yet to unleash the true power of that sword chi. Even so, that sword chi was enough to destroy everything. Just now, Jian Wuzong's attack paled in comparison to that sword chi, like a child waving a sword randomly. The cultivators at the side felt their hearts skip a beat. It was obvious what Jian Wuzong's current situation was. It was as though he could smell the aura of death. Jian Wuzong's pupils constricted violently as he conjured hand seals repeatedly. Dermic powers surged and a gigantic dermic power sword was formed between his palms. Slay! Jian Wuzong roared and waved the dermic power sword, slashing towards the incoming sword chi. Shing! There was a soft sound. It was almost inaudible. The dermic power sword in Jian Wuzong's hands was sliced into 2 by the white sword chi and dissipated instantly. However, the sword chi did not stop and pierced Jian Wuzong's chest. Sword sect's dermic arts could not defend against that sword chi at all. Jian Wuzong's expression was menacing and the veins on his neck popped. His eyes were filled with indignation. Although the sword chi might not be able to kill him, it would definitely destroy his body after entering his body. Even if it was in the sword sect, he'd never seen such terrifying sword chi. I'm indignant. Jian Wuzong let out a final roar. All of a sudden. Just as Jian Wuzong was about to give up, a huge tug came from his arm and pulled him back. Jian Wuzong's figure floated and fell in front of sword sect's formation. As he shifted his gaze, he saw a familiar figure standing in front of him. Senior brother. Jian Wuzong was shocked. Hang Qiuyu still stood out when his life was on the line. Senior brother, help me kill him. Jian Wuzong shouted through gritted teeth. Hang Qiuyu did not say anything. He could not say anything either. It was only when he truly stood before the sword chi that Hang Qiuyu felt fear. Unknowingly, beads of sweat had already appeared on his face. Buzz! Hang Qiuyu attacked. An incomparably dazzling sword beam appeared. 6 dermic patterns, a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. Wherever the sword beam passed, all life in the void seemed to be taken away by the sword. Lifeless sword art. This sword art was a secret skill that the founder master of sword sect deduced from one of the 3 ancient sword arts and was shockingly powerful. Clang! The sword chi collided with the tip of the sword. Endless killing intent spread. The void at the point of collision seemed to be sliced into pieces. Hang Qiuyu shuddered and staggered 3 steps back. With every step he took, the soles of his feet sank deeply into the ground, leaving behind a clear footprint. The terrifying sword chi finally dissipated. However, Hang Qiuyu's sword-wielding arm was still trembling uncontrollably. Even with his Khanate dermic weapon coupled with the lifeless sword art, he could only barely defend against the sword chi. What was the background of that sword chi? What frightened Hang Qiuyu even more was not the sword chi. It was the person who released it. After releasing the sword Qi, Mo Ling turned around and faced Yi Tiancheng's 8 maidservants. He did not turn back again. He did not even look at them. Who could match this kind of self-confidence? What truly caused Heng Qiuyu's heart to sink into the abyss was the person's identity. Before they even got close, they emitted a pungent stench. Poison. That method was familiar and was the same as the moves of poison sect cultivators. Su Zimo sneered internally and took a deep breath of air. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and roared as the poison needles were about to pierce his face. Kill. Thunderclap Kill was released. Boom. That voice sounded like thunder in the ears of the 8 maidservants. The first to suffer a backlash was Yi Yi, who was playing the flute. The flute was interrupted instantly. Yi Yi grunted dully and her face turned pale instantly. A series of cracks appeared on the flute, it was clearly crippled. Furthermore, Su Zimo's roar was released with the power of his lungs and a massive air current gushed out of his mouth. The cluster of poison needles was blown away by Su Zimo's breath. Immediately after, a series of incomparably stunning sword beams followed. A series of ripples seemed to have appeared in the voids, rippling towards Yi Tu, Yi San and the others. See Calming Manual, Ripple. Like before, he released his saber intent with his long sword. The sword beam was chilling and sliced across Yi Tu and Yi San's throats rapidly. Both of them were stunned on the spot as their minds went blank from the shock of Thunderclap Kill. By the time they reacted, they felt themselves rising and spinning in midair. They were looking at their own corpses. Headless corpses. 2 gigantic heads were severed by Su Zimo's sword. Yi 8 and Yi 9 were the closest to Su Zimo. The impact of Thunderclap Kill on the 2 of them was also the strongest. Both of their nostrils, ears, mouths and eyes were already bleeding. They were bleeding from all 7 orifices. The 2 of them fell straight to the ground. Before they could even touch the ground, 2 more heads flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, Yi 6 was the only one left of the 5 who charged forward. Her physique was the strongest among the 5 of them and that was the reason why she could hold on. However, the moment she said a single word, Su Zimo had already walked over. Without giving her any chance, he slashed with his sword. Swoosh! That single slash created a torrential wave. Yi 6 had just raised her curved saber when she was sent flying by the slash. Su Zimo severed her head casually. Of the 8 maidservants, only 3 were left. The 3 of you can forget about leaving as well. Su Zimo advanced with his sword. Wherever his sword passed, ripples appeared and enveloped the 3 of them, they could not escape at all. Cling! Clang! Both parties had only exchanged 3 to 4 rounds. 3 heads with fresh blood spewing flew high into the air and fell into the dust before long. There were many Jining Jinjuan who attacked Su Zimo, but the 8 maidservants had the worst outcome. It was like karma. Initially, one of the maidservants was the one who chopped off the head of a Jining Jinjuan. She was unreasonable and no one dared to refute her. But now, this was the outcome for all of them. It's said that sword cultivators are ruthless and decisive in killing. Now that I've seen it for myself, they truly live up to their reputation. That Mo Ling is way too ruthless. He doesn't know how to take care of women at all. The crowd was secretly speechless. Who are you? Right then, a voice sounded from the side. It seemed to be questioning but it was also suppressing something as the voice trembled slightly. Heng Qiuyu glared at Su Zimo fixedly and his sword-wielding arm trembled slightly as he asked once more, "Who are you?" He could tell that it was not sword intent, but saber intent. If one was not the successor of Divine Phoenix Island, there was only a single person in Tianhuang mainland who understood that saber intent. Benefactor, where did you learn that damning true scripture from? Please tell me. The void reversion monks of Wisdom Monastery, Hollow Monastery, and Formless Monastery stood out at the same time and asked loudly with unfriendly expressions. Fufu. Suddenly, Yi Tiancheng laughed and said coolly, "Do you really think that you can fool everyone by using a sword as a saber and releasing saber intent?" He was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent. There was naturally no way Su Zimo's methods could be hidden from him. Right then, Arakatsuki Michinoku stood up slowly and his might descended as he said sternly, "You hid your true appearance. Who are you to hide at the Thousand Crane Tea Party?" Chapter 953. The crowd was stunned. Everyone from 100 Refinements sect was stunned on the spot as well. Yi Tiancheng, Heng Qiuyu and the monks of the Buddhist monasteries were all aggressive as they interrogated Su Zimo. Right now, even Arakatsuki Michinoku stood out. Furthermore, Arakatsuki Michinoku had an unfriendly expression. It was clear that he was truly enraged. Nangong Ling and the other 2 looked at each other with confused expressions. Wasn't that Little Granduncle Master's original appearance? Was Little Granduncle Master hiding his identity? What was his original identity and why did he have to hide it? Lin Ro, Little Fatty, and the others looked nervous. At that moment, everyone's gazes were on the green-robed man in the center of the battlefield. Su Zimo smiled indifferently and was calm. He had long expected this to happen. Now that things had come to this, there was no need to hide anymore. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from Su Zimo's body as the muscles on his face twitched. In the blink of an eye, his appearance changed drastically and he turned into a handsome cultivator. His black hair fluttered and his green robes were upright. His eyes were deep and he exuded a powerful aura that caused one's heart to shudder. Heng Qiuyu was shocked and took half a step back instinctively. His eyes were filled with fear and his breathing quickened. Fairy Luo Shui of Snowdrift Valley's eyes lit up as she stood up. "Ah!" Tang Yu of Elixir Yang sect exclaimed softly and covered her mouth hurriedly with surprise in her eyes. "Wow!" Ru Xian exclaimed and chuckled. "So, Little Granduncle Master looks like this. He's quite handsome." Yi Tiancheng, perfected Lord Pang Lan and the others had never seen Su Zimo before and naturally had no reaction. However, there was an unusual commotion in the crowd. "It's him. He's still alive." Unknowingly, 100 years have passed since that incident. Arakatsuki Michinoku frowned. Many of the cultivators present clearly recognized this person, but when they discussed, their voices were suppressed and they didn't even mention this person's name. It was as if this name had become a taboo. Arakatsuki Michinoku asked again, "Who are you?" "My name is Su Zimo." Su Zimo looked around and said slowly with a calm expression. In an instant, the entire mystic courtyard became so silent that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. That name seemed to have an invisible power that could intimidate the cultivators so much that they did not dare to speak, breathe, or act rashly. Su Zimo, the top of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago, the unprecedented monster of history. In the 2 primordial battlefields, he had suppressed the paragons of various major sects and was invincible among his peers. He had never tasted defeat. He had created an unprecedented Jin Dan phenomenon and left his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. In the minds of many cultivators, all sorts of legends regarding this name appeared. Of course, the most terrifying legends were about the catastrophe of the paragons that happened in Myriad Phenomenon City 100 years ago during the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Legend has it that during that catastrophe, 2 foreign races descended and massacred wantonly. Corpses were strewn all over the city and blood flowed into rivers, countless paragons were killed. More than half of the paragons on the phenomenon ranking were dead. Thankfully, this person protected the final dignity of the human race and fought a bloody battle to the death. He only managed to kill the 2 foreign races after expending almost all of his stamina. Of course, the various major sects and factions forbade the spread of this matter later on and many cultivators who survived kept it a secret as well. As time passed by, many details were gradually drowned in the river of time. This matter also became a legend. After 100 years, not many people believed it to be true. As for some of the juniors, they treated it as a joke and never took it seriously. Notwithstanding others, Nangong Ling, Ru Xian, and the others of 100 Refinement sect were already disdainful of Su Zimo in their previous chats. However, among the cultivators present, there were many cultivators who had been there and were lucky enough to survive. Heng Qiuyu was one of them. Fairy Luo Shui as well. There were others as well. Almost all the cultivators who survived the catastrophe back then entered the nascent soul realm and became paragons of the nascent soul realm, arriving here. In the hearts of these paragons, that name was invincible and taboo. This person was the true number one of the phenomenon ranking. Now that this person was at the nascent soul realm, he was the number one perfected lord. Not the number one perfected lord of the middle continent, but the number one perfected lord of Tianhuang mainland. Little granduncle master, he's actually Su Zimo. Ru Xian opened her mouth in disbelief. Could the legend of the past be true? Nangong Ling murmured softly in a daze as well. Yu Hanyun had a conflicted expression. She had long noticed Su Zimo's abnormality. However, she had not expected their granduncle master to have such a powerful background. Everything seemed to have an explanation now. Su Zimo was probably the only one who had the boldness to shout at Yi Tiancheng and tell him to get down. Su Zimo was the only one who could beat Jian Wuzong, who was third on the phenomenon ranking to the point that he could not even draw his sword. Su Zimo was the only one who dared to take on all the paragons present single-handedly. No wonder. Yu Hanyun looked at Ling Ro and the others who were not far away. She finally understood why Su Zimo wanted to stand out and help Ling Ro and the others withstand the immense pressure from Yi Tiancheng and Arikatsuki Michinoku. Arikatsuki Michinoku narrowed her eyes with a conflicted expression. With her status, she naturally knew everything that had happened in Wanxiang City 100 years ago. No matter what, the Chiguramon owed Su Zimo a debt of gratitude for the battle 100 years ago. Or rather, all the paragons and sects that survived 100 years ago owed Su Zimo a huge debt of gratitude. However, Su Zimo's situation was complicated. This person had already offended many super sects such as Glass Palace, Chaos Essence Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace, all of them wanted to kill him. Furthermore, this person cultivated a demon cultivation technique. Up till now, no one knew if he was a human or demon. As the master of a sect of the Chiguramon, Arikatsuki Michinoku was hesitant about how to deal with this person. If he was killed, it would be morally unacceptable. If he was not killed, it would be equivalent to offending a few super sects. For a moment, Arikatsuki Michinoku fell silent as well. This was an unprecedented and strange scene. A single name caused the entire mystic courtyard to fall silent. Senior brother, what are you waiting for? Go kill that person and help me avenge my humiliation. Jian Wuzong could not help but nudge Heng Qiuyu. Heng Qiuyu glared at Su Zimo with a dark expression without saying anything. Jian Wuzong grit his teeth and said hatefully, he can't release that sword art a second time within a short period of time. Senior brother, help me kill him. Shut up. Heng Qiuyu suddenly turned around and slapped Jian Wuzong in the face. Jian Wuzong was stunned by the slap. Heng Qiuyu glared at Jian Wuzong with a cold gaze and said coldly, get lost. Don't embarrass yourself here. Do you know who he is? Senior brother, are you afraid? Jian Wuzong roared in laughter. What happened 100 years ago was merely a rumor. To think that you would be frightened by someone who was exaggerated. Ha 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 ha. Rumor? Heng Qiuyu replied coldly, it's all true. How do you know? You didn't witness it personally. Jian Wuzong could not continue. He suddenly recalled that Heng Qiuyu was ranked 8th on the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago and had experienced everything in Myriad Phenomenon City personally. Chapter 954. Hang Qiuyu looked at Su Zimo, who was not far away, with a conflicted expression. Although they had only exchanged half a move, he knew in his heart that the difference between the two of them was even greater. At that moment, the moment he said the word Su Zimo, he realized that he no longer had the courage to attack this person. The void reversion of Sword Sect narrowed his eyes with a cold glint as he asked suspiciously, "Is this person really as powerful as the legends say?" "Yes," Hang Qiuyu did not hesitate and replied with certainty. "Fufu." The void reversion of Sword Sect sneered, "No matter what, this person is only the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. There are 2 people at the top of the phenomenon ranking here, and he doesn't have any extra heads or arms." Hang Qiuyu shook his head. Throughout history, there have been many people at the top of the phenomenon ranking. However, he's different. "Fufu, what's so different about him?" The void reversion of Sword Sect sneered again. "What are you trying to do?" Hang Qiuyu turned around and asked with a frown. The void reversion of Sword Sect said coldly, "I heard that this person is a demon. Since he's a demon, we'll naturally kill him with all our might. There's no need for morality." Hang Qiuyu said sternly, "I advise you not to have any designs on him." Hang Qiuyu said that from the bottom of his heart. Outsiders who had not experienced the catastrophe of Myriad Phenomenon City personally would never be able to understand how terrifying this green-robed scholar was. No matter how strong he is, can he defeat a void reversion and defend against the sword in my hands? The void reversion of Sword Sect pouted. "To think that it's as Jian Wuzong said, you're already afraid. Hang Qiuyu, you've truly disappointed me. I admit that I'm afraid." Hang Qiuyu did not hide anything and paused for a moment before changing the topic. "However, even if I'm not afraid, I won't attack him. Any cultivator of the Sword Sect can attack him, but I can't. 100 years ago, I owed him my life." The void reversion of Sword Sect harumphed and did not say anything else. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Bai glared at Su Zimo and licked his lips. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes as he was raring to go. Not every genius would feel fear upon hearing this name. Although Ling Bai was ranked 20th on the phenomenon ranking, he had obtained a great opportunity after advancing to the nascent soul realm and believed that he was not weaker than the other nascent soul paragons. At the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time, he had also been holding back and wanted to amaze the world with a single feat. Right then, the void reversion of Snowdrift Valley, Fairy Luo Shui, stood out and cupped her fists towards Su Zimo with a smile. "It's been 100 years since we parted in Myriad Phenomenon City. Do you still remember me, Brother Su? Fairy's elegance is not inferior to men." "How could I forget?" Su Zimo said with a smile. Back in Wanxiang City, only 3 of the 13 Jinying Jinjuan did not choose to escape. Fairy Luo Shui was one of them. Fairy Luo Shui also knew that this was not the time to reminisce about the past. She only said a few words of greeting before retreating. "Snowdrift Valley disciples, listen up." Fairy Luo Shui said slowly, "You can fight if you want, but no one is allowed to attack Su Zimo." "Ah, why?" Ling Bai was indignant and asked with a frown. Fairy Luo Shui said indifferently, "Continue watching. I won't harm you guys. Since he's here, there's nothing to be afraid of at this 1,000 Crane Tea Party unless the Dharma Daojun appears." At the mention of Su Zimo's name, some were wary, some were fearful and some were indifferent. Perfected Lord Pang Lon was one of them. He was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago and was half a step into the void reversion realm. The reason why he came this time round was because he was confident enough to drink that final cup of supreme-grade mystic tea. To be fair, he did not even take Yi Tiancheng seriously because he had some trump cards. All these years, he had been in seclusion. As for the shocking battle 100 years ago, he had never heard of the calamity of outstanding talents. Hence, he did not feel any fear in his heart at all. Number 1 of the phenomenon ranking? Perfected Lord Pang Lon smiled indifferently. Who isn't? Perfected Lord Pang Lan was older and was more composed than other nascent soul paragons. He had no intention of attacking at all. The situation before him was clear: Su Zimo and Yi Tiancheng were bound to fight. All he had to do was watch from the sidelines and reap the benefits. Good, good, good. Yi Tiancheng finally moved and stood up slowly from his throne. He looked at Su Zimo, who was not far away, and grinned. I'm merely a bait for the marriage proposal this time round. Initially, I thought that I would be able to catch a couple of small fishes. To think that I would catch a big one. At that point, Yi Tiancheng no longer concealed his motive for the marriage proposal. Leng Ro turned to look at Arikatsuki Michinoku. Arikatsuki Michinoku's expression was terrible, but he did not say anything, nor did he have any intention of apologizing to Leng Ro. As the master of a sect and Leng Ro's master, she would not lower her head even if she knew that she was in the wrong in front of everyone. In my eyes, you're also bait. Su Zimo said indifferently, since Diin didn't come today, he's dodged a calamity. I'll use you to fish him out. Fufu. Yi Tiancheng laughed with mockery in his eyes as he shook his head. Su Zimo, oh Su Zimo, I admit that you're indeed qualified to challenge me. However, you're overestimating yourself if you want to challenge senior brother Diin. The difference between the two of you is like heaven and earth. You're mistaken about two things. Su Zimo extended his finger and shook it gently. Firstly, I'm not the one challenging you, you're the one challenging me. You were nothing when I became famous. I'm also the number one of the phenomenon ranking. Yi Tiancheng was way too young and was already enraged by a slight provocation. Number one of the phenomenon ranking? Su Zimo smiled gently. That's because I wasn't around. If I was, I would have wiped you off the phenomenon ranking. Wiped. He said it casually, as though he was wiping away dust. Secondly, Su Zimo continued, there's indeed a difference between me and Diin. 100 years ago, he was chased down by me and fled pathetically, not even daring to return to Myriad Phenomenon City. That difference is truly like heaven and earth. Ha 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 ha, it's all old news from 100 years ago. Who knows if it's true? Yi Tiancheng laughed sinisterly. Su Zimo, you're old and can only reminisce about the past. Your era is over. 100 years later, it's my era, Yi Tiancheng's era. I'm the number one perfected lord. You're wrong again, Su Zimo shook his head. Since I've returned 100 years later, I'm the number one perfected lord. You're not allowed to touch that title unless I allow it. You're not allowed to touch that title unless I allow it. His words were extremely domineering and an invisible aura crushed over. Yi Tiancheng even felt a sense of pressure. So what if I want to? Yi Tiancheng glared at Su Zimo with a menacing expression and said word by word. Su Zimo's gaze was like a knife as he said slowly, I'll kill you if you dare to lay your hands on it. Chapter 955. Kill me. Yi Tiancheng smiled sinisterly and turned to look at Arikatsuki Michinoku, who was not far away, saying coldly, today, this is a personal feud between Chaos Essence Sect and that person. It's not within the scope of the Paragon competition. Arikatsuki Michinoku, please don't interfere. In other words, the two of them were going to have a life and death battle. Suddenly, Dao Bing Chi Guy of Zephyr Thunder Palace stood up. Everyone, don't forget that we don't know if this lad is human or demon. Initially, Zephyr Thunder Palace was watching from the sidelines. However, there was no way they would let Su Zimo off now that his true identity was exposed. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, the paragon of Zephyr Thunder Palace died in the hands of Night Spirit. In order to snatch the Purple Thunder Manual, perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace was turned into a pool of blood by Su Zimo and his essence spirit was destroyed. Be it for revenge or the Purple Thunder Manual, Zephyr Thunder Palace naturally could not sit still when they saw Su Zimo reappear and stood out. The void reversion of Hellfire Hall said hatefully, if he's a demon and wants to sneak into the Thousand Crane Tea Party to obtain the supreme grade mystic tea, causing internal strife between the major sects, his intentions are merciless. Patriarch Lanue should kill him directly as a warning to others. Ming Han's throat was crushed by Su Zimo and his essence spirit was damaged. Even if he woke up, it would be difficult for him to regain his former glory. Hellfire Hall hated Su Zimo to the core. That's right. The void reversion of Sword Sect harumphed. I heard that this lad is even sworn brothers with a group of demons. If he's not a demon, what is he? The super sects expressed their opinions one after another. Arikatsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and had no choice but to stand out. She slapped her storage bag and took out a shimmering mirror. Tossing it gently into the air, she tapped it gently with her fingertip. A stream of dermic powers entered it. Whoosh! The mirror shone brightly and a gigantic beam of light landed on Su Zimo. Demon Revealing Mirror. The Demon Revealing Mirror was a Dharma treasure specially created by the Weapon Emperor of the Ancient Era to restrain demons. It had no effect on cultivators but was extremely harmful to demons. Legend had it that a true demon revealing mirror could turn all demons into ashes with a single beam of light. It was extremely terrifying. The later demon revealing mirrors were all imitations. Although it was not as powerful as the real demon revealing mirror, it was still very effective against demons. Under the illumination of the demon revealing mirror, the demons had nowhere to hide and would reveal their true forms. Furthermore, his primordial spirit and dermic powers would be suppressed. Back in the intermediate ancient battlefield, Glass Palace relied on a few demon-revealing mirrors to set up a formation that trapped Su Zimo on the spot. Now, the mirror in Arikatsuki Michinoku's hand was a replica of the demon-revealing mirror. Even so, the demon-revealing mirror was a Dao Lord dermic weapon and had an absolute suppressive effect against a nascent soul demon. Len Ro, Little Fatty, and the others immediately tensed up. However, they soon realized that there was no need for that. Under the beam of the demon-revealing mirror, Su Zimo stood with his hands behind his back with an indifferent expression. He was not affected at all. In no way did he look like a demon being suppressed. After advancing to the nascent soul realm, Su Zimo cultivated two essence spirits. Right now, the black-haired essence spirit in his consciousness was condensed from cultivating the top cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist Taoists of the human race. It was incomparably pure and would not be affected at all. As for the scarlet-haired Een spirit, it hid in the depths of his consciousness and would not be detected unless someone's spirit consciousness probed. Everyone from Zephyr Thunder Palace and Chaos Essence Sect frowned when they saw that. Could the rumors be false? Or could it be that this person had some sort of method that could deceive even the demon-revealing mirror? Arikatsuki Michinoku was expressionless as he put away the demon-revealing mirror and waved his hand. Settle your feud yourselves. Boom! Before his sentence was finished, Yi Tiancheng had already leaped up from his throne. His glabella shone as he conjured hand seals repeatedly and hollered, "Firmament art." Dermic powers were like silk at Yi Tiancheng's fingertips, forming a boundless firmament that enveloped Su Zimo. Firmament art, the top dermic art of Chaos Essence Sect. The firmament was like a blanket that enveloped the entire world. Under the cover of the sky, all living beings would be suppressed. An unimaginable pressure crushed down, as though the entire sky had collapsed and covered the skies. How was that a fight against humans? This was a battle against the heavens, a struggle against the heavens. How could that be done with the power of a human? It's way too scary. Sensing the surging dermic powers on the battlefield, the expressions of the cultivators changed as they exclaimed. Just now, the battle was just now, the dermic arts released by many nascent soul paragons were child's play against this dermic art. As expected of Yi Tiancheng. Nangong Ling murmured with a shocked expression, he's only at early stage nascent soul but he's already able to cultivate such vast dermic powers. If he really cultivates to late stage or perfected nascent soul, how strong will he be? Ru Xian and the others were worried as well. Even though they were not involved, they felt immense pressure. It was hard to imagine how Su Zimo, who was at the center of the battlefield, would react against the firmament art. Su Zimo did not move at all. He merely stood on the spot with his hands behind his back. He raised his head slightly and looked at the descending firmament with disdain. He could tell that the dermic art was extremely strong. However, Yi Tiancheng was far from releasing the power of the dermic art. Firmament art? Su Zimo smiled gently. With a bang, he stomped his feet on the ground and leaped into the air, punching towards the descending firmament. The crowd was in an uproar when they saw that. Against that dermic art, Su Zimo did not summon any dermic weapons, conjure any dermic arts or use any secret skills. Instead, he chose to fight against it with his physical body. Enveloped by the vast firmament, a tiny figure rose against the momentum. It looked like a moth darting into a flame. However, the collision between the two was earth-shattering. Boom! Su Zimo's fist collided heavily against the descending firmament. Instantly, the world went silent. It was as though everything was frozen. Beneath the firmaments, a seemingly tiny figure extended his fist and attacked the firmament, as though he wanted to tear through the firmaments and penetrate the world. Crack! Crack! A series of cracking sounds could be heard. Right in front of countless gazes, cracks appeared in the firmaments one after another. They widened and extended continuously, filling the entire sky in the blink of an eye. It shattered. The firmaments shattered. The domineering firmament art was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. What a terrifying physique. That person's physique is probably not weaker than divine weapons. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Good, good, good. Yi Tiancheng reared his head in laughter without any fear in his eyes as he shouted, Su Zimo, you did not disappoint me indeed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Swinging his sleeves, Yi Tiancheng shot cold beams of light towards Su Zimo at an extremely fast speed. 49 flying swords tore through the air with streaking sword chi. Ah, it's a set of flying swords. Suddenly, the void reversion of ancient array sect said, I remember now. This is a set of flying swords that Chaos Essence Sect's Patriarch personally refined for Chaos Essence Sect's Patriarch when he visited 10 years ago. To think that this set of flying swords would be in Yi Tiancheng's hands. Could it be? Chapter 956. A Sword Formation Master. Nobody expected Yi Tiancheng to be an extremely rare sword formation master in the cultivation world. The more flying swords formed by a sword formation, the harder it was to control and the stronger it would be. Now that Yi Tiancheng had released 49 flying swords and all of them were perfect-grade perfected Lord Dermic weapons, the lethality of that sword formation was unimaginable. Chaos Essence Void Sword Formation. Yi Tiancheng controlled the 49 flying swords and drew trajectories in midair, interweaving to form formation patterns. Su Zimo swept his gaze across Yi Tiancheng's flying swords and sneered. Slapping his storage bag, he took out a grayish-black mountain. It was one of the 7 unique treasures, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Dermic powers surged within Su Zimo's body and injected into the Mystic Magnet Mountain, flinging it into the air. The Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded against the wind and suppressed the 49 flying swords. Yi Tiancheng's expression changed slightly. The Chaos Essence Void Sword Formation was about to be formed. However, he did not expect that after the Mystic Magnet Mountain descended, his flying swords would move uncontrollably towards the Mystic Magnet Mountain. The slightest deviation in the formation patterns would cause it to collapse instantly. Not to mention, the 49 flying swords before him were almost out of control. Freeze! Yi Tiancheng released his massive spirit consciousness, wanting to control the 49 flying swords. However, the Mystic Magnet Mountain had already descended. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening sound, the 49 flying swords were suppressed beneath the mystic magnet mountain. Void Imperial Seal. Yi Tiancheng's reaction was extremely fast as he conjured hand seals repeatedly and struck the mystic magnet mountain with dermic seals. The dermic seals shone with a mysterious light, almost sealing the power of the mystic magnet mountain. Clang! Clang! The 49 flying swords bounced beneath the mountain, wanting to break free. Humph! Su Zimo sneered and his eyes shone with lightning. He conjured hand seals rapidly and a series of rumbling sounds echoed from his body as well. Electric arcs even shone on his body. His black hair danced as purple lightning filled the air. Dark clouds billowed and covered the sky. Su Zimo stood in the air, as if he was in a sea of thunder and lightning. His divine might was awe-inspiring. Purple thunderstorm. Su Zimo shouted and pointed forward. Under the dark clouds, streaks of blazing lightning poured down, connecting the heavens and the earth. They constantly intertwined, forming a terrifying purple lightning storm. It's the Purple Thunder Manual. Zephyr Thunder Palace's Taoist Qi Gai gritted his teeth as a greedy look appeared in his eyes. There was a cultivation technique in the Zephyr Thunder Palace called the Blue Thunder Technique. Be it perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace or Dao being Qi Gai, the reason why they were bent on retrieving the Purple Thunder Manual was because the combination of those two dermic arts was the strongest cultivation technique of the Void Thunder Manual. Legend has it that the combination of the two cultivation techniques could create an essence spirit secret skill with shocking might. If I can make use of this opportunity to obtain the Purple Thunder Manual, I can fuse the two cultivation techniques together. Taoist Qi Gai's eyes flickered with excitement. This was an opportunity that belonged to him and he must not miss it. On the battlefield, the purple thunderstorm descended as though it wanted to destroy the world. The storm enveloped the mystic magnet mountain and purple lightning flashed. Before long, it destroyed the dermic seal left behind by Yi Tiancheng's Void Imperial Sealing Technique. The 49 flying swords were suppressed by the mystic magnet mountain once more. Not only that, the purple thunderstorm was already moving in the direction of Yi Tiancheng, wanting to engulf him as well. All the cultivators held their breaths and focused, their eyes filled with shock. It was as though those two bedazzling figures were the only ones left in the world. The fight between the two of them caused the weather to change and the world to quake. A fight as such had far surpassed the cultivators' understanding of Jinying Zhenjuan's strength. Vast ocean. Yi Tiancheng finally put away the contempt in his heart. His eyes misted over as he opened his mouth and spat out two words. Splash. A vast ocean appeared behind Yi Tiancheng. He was within it, as though he was one with the ocean. Yi Tiancheng's figure turned blurry. Ah! It's his Jin Dan phenomenon. It's because of that Jin Dan phenomenon that he swept through the Jin Dan realm and dominated the phenomenon ranking. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. As long as cultivators were willing to comprehend and deduce, many Jin Dan phenomenons could be converted into dermic arts that belonged to them. Of course, the process of deduction was extremely long and boring. There were also many paragons who wasted their time without gaining anything. Vast ocean surged and engulfed the purple thunderstorm instantly. Layers of waves rose from the ocean and engulfed Su Zimo. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. Interesting, Su Zimo murmured softly. All of a sudden. Beneath his feet, a colossal creature emerged. The massive object had 4 legs and 2 heads. It carried a gigantic shell on its body that was filled with mysterious ravines. It was ancient and seemed as though it could understand the mysteries of heaven and earth. Its shell propped up the firmaments and its 4 legs were indomitable as it moved continuously against the ocean. Groar! The heads of the tortoise snake reared their heads and roared into the skies with divine light shining in all directions. Heaven and earth shook. Tortoise snake phenomenon, the descent of the black tortoise. To think that I would be able to see this phenomenon again after 100 years, Hang Chuyu's expression was emotional. Instantly, it was as though he had returned to Myriad Phenomenon City where the paragons fought and the phenomenons collided. Jian Wuzong said sourly, they're both Jin Dan phenomenons of the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. There's not much difference. The difference is way too great. Hang Chuyu shook his head and did not explain further. That was because the result of this collision of phenomenons after 100 years would be revealed very soon. Su Zimo rode on the tortoise snake and moved against the current. The distance between the two of them closed continuously. Yi Tiancheng's expression was unchanged and his figure turned increasingly illusory. Bright moon. By the time he said that, his figure had already vanished above the ocean. Then, between the sea and the sky, a bright moon slowly rose, sprinkling down rays of silver light onto the surface of the sea. The sparkling waves were as beautiful as a painting. Yi Tiancheng had already fused completely into his phenomenon. Sanghai Mingyue. Number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. This was also the Jin Dan phenomenon created by Yi Tiancheng that was unprecedented and unprecedented. Sanghai Mingyue. Su Zimo smiled gently and his figure blurred for a moment before vanishing as well. On the wide and thick turtle shell, raging flames surged, and a green lotus grew. Under the burning of the raging flames, the green color gradually faded, and it bloomed with dazzling golden light. Swoosh! Suddenly, the golden lotus moved. It collided fiercely towards the rising moon between the horizon and the ocean. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Cracks appeared on the bright moon one after another. The picturesque scene was shattered instantly as Yi Tiancheng's figure fell out. His face was pale and his clothes were in a mess as he staggered in retreat. Su Zimo's figure appeared as well, his green robes fluttering without a speck of dust. The result of the clash between the two phenomenons had already been revealed. It was clear who was superior. Su Zimo strode forward and said indifferently, "Even if you're the true bright moon, I can suppress you." Chapter 957. Yi Tiancheng was very strong. As the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, he had created an unprecedented Jin Dan phenomenon and left his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. His hands were stained with the blood of more than one void reversion. He had killed an opponent who was a major cultivation realm above him. All of that was enough to prove his strength. He was only at early stage nascent soul. He was not the only one, even others did not dare to imagine what kind of combat strength he would possess once he cultivated to late stage or perfected nascent soul. Yi Tiancheng had never tasted defeat throughout his cultivation journey. To him, fighting above his cultivation realm was as normal as eating and drinking. He did have the strength to do so. Unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong opponent. Among those of the same cultivation realm, there was no one who could fight against Su Zimo, let alone the fact that he was 2 minor cultivation realms lower than Su Zimo. Their dermic powers were not on the same level. Yi Tiancheng was defeated miserably in the collision of phenomenons. If not for the fact that he had a powerful defensive dermic weapon, he would have been severely injured in this clash. Little Granduncle Master actually gained the upper hand? Nangong Ling was secretly speechless. They had personally witnessed Yi Tiancheng sweeping through those of the same cultivation realm in a domineering and invincible manner. In the hearts of many of them, Yi Tiancheng was the symbol of invincibility. They truly did not expect that someone of the same cultivation realm would be able to gain the upper hand against Yi Tiancheng. "I'm afraid it's not as simple as gaining the upper hand," Yu Hanyun shook her head. Right from the beginning, has Yi Tiancheng truly retaliated against Granduncle Master? Nangong Ling and Ru Xian were stunned. Yi Tiancheng had powerful methods and many trump cards. Although he appeared endlessly and even released his Jin Dan phenomenon, all of them were destroyed by Su Zimo. This was not gaining the upper hand, this was a crushing defeat. On the battlefield, the distance between the two sides was rapidly closing. Yi Tiancheng narrowed his eyes and took out a pitch-black mountain from his storage bag unhurriedly, smashing it towards Su Zimo. The mountain continued to expand, its surface flickering with rays of light. This mountain peak was actually a perfect magical artifact. Su Zimo's expression remained unchanged. His glabella flickered, and a green lotus throne flew out. Compared to the Black Mountain, the green lotus platform looked incomparably small. However, when the two collided, an earth-shattering sound erupted. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the mountain peak, the perfect dermic artifact, was actually smashed into smithereens by the green lotus platform. Hiss! The crowd was aghast. A perfected Lord Dermic weapon was destroyed just like that. Even Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapons would not be able to produce such terrifying lethality. It's Qinglian of creation. Right then, a void reversion of the Buddhist monasteries exclaimed as he recognized the origin of the green lotus platform. Heavens, the Qinglian of creation has already revived and grown to grade 5. How did that person do it? This is way too scary. With the Qinglian of creation in his hands, whose dermic weapon can compare to it? The monks of the Buddhist monasteries were shocked. The mountain peak exploded. Amidst the flying sand and rocks, Yi Tiancheng's figure suddenly appeared and lunged over with a stone hammer in his hands. He seemed to have expected that the mountain peak would not be able to stop Su Zimo. The stone hammer looked ordinary and crude. However, it emitted an extremely ancient aura, as though it came from the primordial era. Shatter! Yi Tiancheng raised his arm and smashed it towards Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo's expression changed. The Qinglian of creation tore through the void and collided with the stone hammer. Boom! There was another deafening sound. The stone hammer flew out of his hands. The Qinglian of creation was sent flying as well, turning into a streak of green light that fell into the crowd. Yi Tiancheng shuddered and his eyes shone with disbelief. Although the stone hammer in his hands did not have any dermic patterns, it had a great background and could even shatter a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. To think that he would lose his grip on the stone hammer and fly out of his hands after colliding with the Qinglian of creation. Su Zimo's eyes were filled with surprise as well. The grade 5 creation Qinglian of creation was already comparable to Khanate Dao being dermic weapons. He had not expected that the stone hammer would not shatter. Of course, that did not affect the entire situation. Yi Tiancheng was slightly stunned. However, Su Zimo did not hesitate at all. He strode forward and extended his palm, clenching it into a fist and punching Yi Tiancheng. Yi Tiancheng reacted and was fearless. Instead, he retaliated with a punch. Bang! The two fists collided in a crushing manner. Yi Tiancheng grunted dully and his expression changed starkly. His physique was definitely not weak and he was only a step away from cultivating tsunami blood. To think that his fist would nearly shatter after exchanging a single punch with Su Zimo, the pain was unbearable. Ha 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 ha! Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. Yi Tiancheng, you're still far from being comparable to Di Yin. Previously, the two of them fought in Myriad Phenomenon City. Because Su Zimo could not use his demon blood qi, he was disadvantaged in melee combat and was suppressed by Di Yin. He had no choice but to release dermic arts to counterattack and recover his losses. But now, Su Zimo had suppressed Yi Tiancheng with his physique alone without even activating his bloodline. Not necessarily. Yi Tiancheng's voice was cold and a ruthless glint flashed through his eyes. Immediately after, a series of strange fluctuations burst forth from his eyes, as though the entire world was spinning. Time was in chaos and space was distorted. Two beams of light burst forth from Yi Tiancheng's eyes and collided in midair, forming a gigantic wheel that crushed over slowly, as though it wanted to engulf the entire world. The wheel was all-encompassing, as though it could reverse the 5 elements, throw yin and yang into chaos and flip the universe, causing all living beings to fall into reincarnation. Eye of reincarnation. It was one of the ancient visual techniques. Both parties were extremely close and there was no way to dodge the burst of the visual technique. The cultivators were moved. Nobody expected that at this point of the battle, Yi Tiancheng would release a counterattack and release the Eye of Reincarnation just as he was about to suffer a crushing defeat. Visual techniques were the hardest to cultivate. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had only encountered 2 or 3 paragons with visual techniques. To think that Chaos Essence sect would produce 2. It was only normal for cultivators with visual techniques to be invincible against those of the same cultivation realm. Visual techniques were released instantaneously and were almost fatal if they were caught off guard. Even if the opponent could react in time, they might not be able to defend against it. Even if they could defend against it, they would definitely exhaust their mental strength. If they seized the opportunity to attack, they would still be able to kill the other party. The expressions of Leng Ro and the others changed. They knew that Su Zimo knew an extremely terrifying visual technique as well. Previously, when Su Zimo fought against the Protoss, he released this visual technique and gained the upper hand. However, that visual technique was the Illumination Dragon's Eye. Once released, it would be equivalent to exposing the fact that he was a demonic cultivator. If Arakatsuki Michinoku intervened, not only would he not be able to kill Yi Tiancheng, Su Zimo might even die here. In a flash, a dense cluster of flying swords appeared in Su Zimo's right eye. They were small and exquisite, resembling embroidery needles. Those embroidery needles were none other than the 36 flying swords conjured by the Illumination Stone. In the blink of an eye, the 36 flying swords had already formed the Illumination Sword formation and shot out from Su Zimo's right eye. Chapter 958. Because this was the Thousand Crane Tea Party and the Dharma Dao Jun was present, Su Zimo did not use any methods of the demon race or his second essence spirit the entire time. Otherwise, if Su Zimo were to release his full cultivation, Yi Tiancheng might not be able to last more than 10 moves. It was the same now. In a visual technique duel, Su Zimo did not choose the Illumination Dragon Eye. Instead, he released the Illumination Sword formation. Those were flying swords formed from illumination stones that complemented the sword formation perfectly and released their might to their limits. Clang! 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 The sword formation formed from 36 flying swords trembled and buzzed, forming a bedazzling sword beam that slashed down viciously at the incoming wheel. Boom! The collision of the two forces caused a deafening explosion. Instantly, the sword formation dissipated and the 36 flying swords transformed into sword beams that returned to Su Zimo's right eye. Little Granduncle Master was defeated. Ru Xian and the others felt their hearts tighten with worried expressions. Many cultivators also stared at the battlefield with unblinking eyes. Yi Tiancheng's visual technique wheel froze in midair motionlessly. All of a sudden, cracks appeared on the gigantic visual technique wheel and shone with endless light. It was sharp and almost engulfed Yi Tiancheng. Ah! Yi Tiancheng shrieked tragically and his eyes were in unbearable pain. 2 streams of blood flowed from his eyes and he looked menacing. His clothes were also shredded by the sword qi, revealing a dark golden inner armor that shone with 5 beams of light. It was a perfect-grade defensive dermic weapon. If not for that defensive dermic weapon, Yi Tiancheng's body would have been torn apart. You 9 beasts, what are you waiting for? Kill him! Yi Tiancheng had a tragic expression and pointed in Su Zimo's direction with bloodshot eyes. Roar! The 9 ferocious Jiao dragons that were originally on the ground let out a furious roar. Demonic qi surged as their bodies expanded. They broke free from the chains and soared into the sky, revealing their sharp claws and fangs as they charged towards Su Zimo. There was a commotion in the crowd. Yi Tiancheng's crushing defeat had already exceeded most people's expectations. Who would have thought that after his crushing defeat, he would be unwilling to accept it, and would command the 9 ferocious flood dragons under his command to besiege his opponent? Yi Tiancheng was at the top of the phenomenon ranking and was known as the #1 perfected lord. He couldn't lose. In order to kill Su Zimo, he was willing to do whatever it took. He didn't care about his reputation anymore. What are you doing? Ru Xian was furious and stood out immediately, berating loudly. Daoist Yu Ding's expression was solemn. He turned to look at Arikatsuki Michinoku and said in a deep voice, Senior Lan Yu, why aren't you stopping him? Are we going to let Yi Tiancheng bully us with numbers? Sister Patriarch. Little Fatty protested hurriedly, what's going on with Yi Tiancheng getting 9 ferocious flood dragons to help? Your demon revealing mirror has come in handy at this moment. Hurry and take a look. You're wrong, Chaos Essence Sect's Void Reversion sneered, this isn't a fight between paragons. This is a personal grudge. There's no such thing as bullying with numbers. Dao Bing Chi Guy of Zephyr Thunder Palace said, although the 9 ferocious flood dragons are demons, they are Yi Tiancheng's mounts and are a part of his strength. It's reasonable for them to help him fight. What you guys said makes sense. Continue watching the battle. Arikatsuki Michinoku said indifferently. Len Ro, Little Fatty, and the others, as well as everyone from 100 Refinement Sect, were enraged. Everyone could tell that Arikatsuki Michinoku was biased. Master, you, Len Ro wanted to say something but hesitated. She looked at Arikatsuki Michinoku with disappointment. Arikatsuki Michinoku ignored it. This was a cultivator who had no backing. Furthermore, he had offended a few super sections. One of them was backed by a super sect, and above him was an even more terrifying monster incarnate senior brother with limitless potential. It was clear which side he was on. This is bad, Snowdrift Valley's paragon, Ling Bai, shook her head. The 9 ferocious flood dragons are equivalent to 9 paragons combined. Furthermore, one of them is a mid-level fiend demon. You've underestimated him. Fairy Luo Shui smiled indifferently. The show has just begun. On the battlefield. Su Zimo stood in midair with his green robes fluttering. He looked at the 9 ferocious flood dragons that were charging over with a mocking look in his eyes. In Thousand Demon Valley, there were countless mid-level fiend demons that died in his hands. Su Zimo conjured hand seals and opened his mouth once more. Ma! The damning mantra was released. At the same time, Su Zimo conjured a dermic seal together with the damning mantra. There was a loud rumble. A gigantic golden palm descended from the skies, blanketing the skies and emitting a boundless might. It shone brightly and seemed as though it could subdue all demons. Demon Subduing Seal. The first 3 dermic seals of the damning dermic seal were the Fiend Suppression Seal, Demon Subduing Seal and Immortal Trap Seal. Each seal was targeted. For example, the Fiend Suppression Seal was the most effective against fiend cultivators. The Demon Subduing Seal was the most effective against demons. Su Zimo cultivated a top-tier cultivation technique of the Buddhist monasteries, and his essence spirit was refined with vast dermic powers. Coupled with the Mingwang prayer beads and the damning mantra, even Yi Tiancheng might not be able to defend against this top-tier dermic art of the Buddhist monasteries, let alone the 9 ferocious flood dragons. Ow! 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 The 9 ferocious flood dragons were suppressed by the gigantic palm the moment they charged forward. Only a mid-level fiend demon flood dragon managed to break free from the power of the demon subduing seal and charged forward fiercely with widened eyes. In a flash, Su Zimo turned into a purple bolt of lightning and arrived beside the WYRM in the blink of an eye. The speed of lightning escape was shocking. The flood dragon had a massive body, and although it was ferocious, it was relatively clumsy and could not turn around in time. Get down here. Su Zimo gripped the flood dragon's tail and hollered, swinging his arm and smashing it viciously towards the ground. Boom! The entire ground quaked violently. More than half of the flood dragon's body was smashed into the ground viciously. It was covered in injuries and its tendons and bones were fractured while blood flowed from its head. It was no longer as domineering as it was just now. Pust! This level of strength, 100 years ago, there was a rumor that this man was invincible in melee combat. The rumor was true. All the cultivators widened their eyes in shock. How was this a cultivator? Even the strongest pure-blooded ferocious beasts were suppressed by his body. This man was even more ferocious than ferocious beasts. Perfected Lord Pang Lan's eyes were filled with fear as well. He realized that he must not get close to Su Zimo. Although Heavenly Dipper sect specialized in body tempering as well and his physique was not weak either, he was no different from paper in the hands of Su Zimo. Even so, Perfected Lord Pang Lan had no intention of retreating. He sneered coldly with a cold glint in his eyes. No matter what, Yi Tiancheng was an early-stage nascent soul. Just now, his dermic powers were greatly depleted after the battle and his essence spirit was weak. He made use of this opportunity to consume a large number of elixirs hurriedly. Yi Tiancheng had just caught his breath and was about to charge forward when he realized that his 9 ferocious flood dragons were already swept away by Su Zimo with ease. Yi Tiancheng's heart skipped a beat, and this was the first time his eyes revealed fear. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had encountered countless strong enemies and had never tasted defeat. Although he had experienced multiple life and death situations and his life was hanging by a thread, he had never felt fear in his heart. However, at that moment, Yi Tiancheng was afraid. That cultivator with refined features resembled a ferocious beast that ate humans. That seemingly frail body seemed to contain a terrifying power that could shake the world and suppress all living beings. This person is invincible. That was the only thought left in Yi Tiancheng's mind. Chapter 959. Looking at Su Zimo's indifferent gaze, Yi Tiancheng felt fear and retreated half a step back instinctively. That half a step back caused Yi Tiancheng's aura to dissipate instantly. "You're finished." Su Zimo's figure flashed. By the time he said the last word, he had already arrived beside Yi Tiancheng. Without any unnecessary movements, he threw out a punch and his bloodline surged, letting out the sound of a tsunami with a torrential aura. Tsunami blood. Su Zimo released the power of his bloodline for that punch. Yi Tiancheng's expression changed in shock. Enveloped by the power of that punch, he felt as though he was about to be drowned without a corpse. At that critical moment, Yi Tiancheng roared and released his bloodline at the same time. Dermic powers surged within his body and he punched in reverse. Bang! The two fists collided. Crack! 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 The sound of bones cracking could be heard from Yi Tiancheng's fist. Under the gazes of countless people, his fist had already been beaten out of shape. His flesh was badly mangled, and his broken bones were exposed. It was a ghastly sight. His entire arm could not withstand the power of that punch and the perfect grade inner armor shattered one after another. His flesh exploded into a blood mist. Su Zimo's bloodline was way too terrifying. Now that he had activated his bloodline, the power of a single punch was terrifying. Ah! Yi Tiancheng shrieked tragically. His features were contorted from the pain and the veins on his neck popped as he staggered and retreated. A single punch. Yi Tiancheng was severely injured with a single punch. Even if he survived, his arm would be completely crippled. "I'll take your life in 3 moves." Su Zimo hollered softly and reached out, slapping down towards Yi Tiancheng's head. Even in his peak condition, Yi Tiancheng could not escape from Su Zimo's pursuit. Now that he was severely injured and his movement technique was reduced, he naturally could not dodge and could only raise his other arm to block. Bang! The palm came crashing down. It seemed light, but it broke Yi Tiancheng's arm. The power of this palm strike was still not exhausted. It continued to press down and landed directly on Yi Tiancheng's chest. Pa! Through the thick inner armor, Yi Tiancheng's chest suddenly caved in. Yi Tiancheng's face flushed red. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes dimmed and he used the last of his strength to let out a shrill cry. Save me. A beam of light flew out from the top of Yi Tiancheng's head and sped towards the Hunyuan sect's camp. His primordial spirit had left his body. Yi Tiancheng was extremely decisive. He knew that at this distance, if he did not abandon this body, he would undoubtedly die. In his current state, there was no way he could escape from Su Zimo's pursuit with his battered body. Only by exploding with the speed of his essence spirit could he avoid this calamity. When they saw that, the cultivators were shocked. On one hand, it was because the outcome of the battle had already been decided and Yi Tiancheng was already forced to such an embarrassing state. On the other hand, in this battle where dermic powers surged and auras shot in all directions, it was equivalent to suicide for a nascent soul's essence spirit to leave his body. However, immediately after, the cultivators were shocked to discover that Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit was traveling through the chaotic battlefield unscathed. The essence spirit was shrouded in a gray mist that seemed to be able to defend against the astral winds. Hunyuan sect had a top-notch spirit refinement technique that could allow one's essence spirit to cultivate chaos essence qi at the nascent soul realm. Although he was at early-stage nascent soul, Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit could leave his body and roam the world like the essence spirit of a void reversion with the help of chaos essence qi. At the same time, he sought help from Hunyuan sect, hoping that a void reversion of Hunyuan sect could take action and block Su Zimo so that he could resolve this crisis. Yi Tiancheng's plan was not bad. Unfortunately, he had still underestimated Su Zimo. Oh. His essence spirit can leave his body. Su Zimo raised his brows slightly and said indifferently, however, it's useless. It was already not easy for an early-stage nascent soul to be able to leave his body with his essence spirit. Back then, Su Zimo had only reached this stage by relying on Qinglian's creation. If Yi Tiancheng was at late-stage nascent soul and was comparable to Su Zimo's cultivation realm, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to kill the latter. However, there was no doubt that Su Zimo would crush him domineeringly in today's battle. The void reversion of Hunyuan sect leaped into the air hurriedly and conjured hand seals, preparing to release a dermic art to save Yi Tiancheng. However, a bolt of lightning flashed through his eyes. Swash! It was too fast. Before he could react, another person had appeared in front of him. Su Zimo. A pair of wings formed from dermic powers behind him dissipated slowly. With the burst of ethereal wings and lightning escape, Su Zimo arrived first and gripped Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit in his palm. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. Chaos Essence Sect's void reversion had yet to conjure his dermic art. Chaos Essence Sect's void reversion was shocked and took 2 steps back. Even he was afraid of Su Zimo getting close to him. The other Chaos Essence sect cultivators were even more flustered and retreated one after another. You can't kill me. Yi Tiancheng's voice sounded from Su Zimo's palm, sounding fierce on the outside but cowardly on the inside. Everyone looked over. In Su Zimo's palm was a gigantic ball of dermic power. Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit was trapped within and could not move in fear. Su Zimo, release him. Chaos Essence Sect's void reversion reacted and shouted. Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit was in Su Zimo's palm and could be crushed with a single thought. He did not dare to act rashly out of fear of breaking the vases. Arakatsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and stood up slowly, saying in a deep voice, Su Zimo, since the outcome is decided, let him go. Fu! A hint of mockery flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Turning around, he looked at the high and mighty Arakatsuki Michinoku and asked instead, if I were in Yi Tiancheng's shoes, would Patriarch Lanuet plead for mercy on my behalf? Arakatsuki Michinoku's expression darkened. The battle between Yi Tiancheng and Su Zimo was clearly a personal feud and had nothing to do with her Chiguramon. However, if she could save Yi Tiancheng's life, it could be considered as doing Chaos Essence Sect a favor. In Arakatsuki Michinoku's heart, if it was as Su Zimo said, she would definitely not plead for mercy on behalf of Su Zimo and offend a super sect such as Chaos Essence Sect. Arikatsuki Michinoku suppressed the anger in her heart and said sternly, Junior, I've been through this before. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you're too sharp and have no reservations, you'll definitely be killed in the future. Killed in the future? Suzumo smiled indifferently. I already have a lot of troubles to begin with. I don't care if there's one more. Suzumo, we don't have a deep feud. It's just the title of number 1 perfected lord. I'll give it to you. There's no need for you to kill me. Yi Tiancheng was scared out of his wits and begged for mercy with a trembling voice filled with endless fear. The crowd sighed. It was truly a pity that the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and the number 1 perfected lord of the middle continent had fallen to such a state. Not many people could remain calm in the face of death. Yi Tiancheng, if it was just a fight for the title of number 1 perfected lord, I wouldn't even bother to make a move. Suzumo's gaze shifted as he glared at the essence spirit in his palm and said coldly, however, you shouldn't have targeted Leng Ro. Yi Tiancheng's heart turned cold when he heard that. Suzumo had already raised his head and looked at everyone from Chaos Essence sect coldly. Since Diin wants to lure me out, I'll give him a huge gift today. Die. Suzumo gripped his palm tightly. Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit was crushed and destroyed on the spot. Chapter 960. Instantly, the mystic courtyard fell silent. When they saw that, everyone's mouths were agape with conflicted expressions and they could not calm down for a long time. Dead. The number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, the number 1 perfected lord of the middle continent and one of the twin paragons of Chaos Essence sect, Yi Tiancheng, died in front of everyone just like that. In addition to being shocked, the crowd also sighed with emotion. This was the cultivation world. So what if he was a paragon? So what if he was a monster incarnate? Without standing at the peak of Tianhuang mainland, there was still the danger of being killed. Paragons that died prematurely would eventually be forgotten. It wouldn't take long. In 100 years, not many people would still remember Yi Tiancheng. He was way too young. He rose like a comet and only made a name for himself for a few decades. To think that he would meet an even more terrifying monster incarnate and end up with such an outcome. Everyone knew that Yi Tiancheng had only himself to blame for his death. His motive for proposing marriage was to force little fatty, Ji Qingtian, Shi Jian, and the other old friends of Su Zimo to appear so that he could kill them one by one. However, Yi Tiancheng did not expect that he would attract a dragon instead of a snake out of its hole. Jian Wuzong looked at the seemingly frail green-robed cultivator in the center of the battlefield with a look of fear in his eyes. It was only at this moment that he truly understood the reason why Hang Qiuyu did not dare to draw his sword against this person. He recalled that he had attacked this person twice and felt a sense of trepidation. If one were to say that this person was decisive and showed off his ability, no one would object. Even a monster incarnate like Yi Tiancheng with such a background, identity, status, and fame was killed by this person just like that. There was no hesitation at all. However, Jian Wuzong refused to believe that this person was bloodthirsty. That was because he was still alive. He had attacked this person twice and yet he was still alive. Arikatsuki Michinoku's expression turned terrible. She had not expected that Su Zimo would kill Yi Tiancheng here without giving her any face. The cultivation world is going to experience a bloodbath with his return. Is he declaring war on Diin? Diin has already stepped into the void reversion realm. Although this person's combat strength is strong, he is a major realm lower than Diin. Isn't he a little too arrogant? Sounds of discussion could be heard from the crowd. No matter what, the title of the number 1 perfected cultivator shouldn't be a problem. That's right. I'm afraid that only this person has the qualifications to drink the last cup of supreme-grade mystic tea. Whoosh! A beam of cold light pierced through the air and pierced the back of Su Zimo's head, arriving in an instant. Just as everyone was discussing, someone in the crowd suddenly attacked without any warning. When this cold light was about to pierce Su Zimo's head, a voice was heard, "If you want to drink the best quality mystic tea, you have to ask me. Attack first and speak later." This was a complete sneak attack. Furthermore, that person's dermic powers were frightening and 6 dermic patterns shone on his flying sword. It was a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon with shocking lethality. He did not hold back at all with this sword strike. Whoosh! Under everyone's gaze, the flying sword pierced through Su Zimo's head. However, there was no splatter of blood. The cultivators focused their gazes. The Su Zimo that was penetrated by the flying sword was gradually dissipating into nothingness. As for the real Su Zimo, he had already dodged to the side. Because he was too fast, the only thing left on the spot was an afterimage of him. If it was anyone else, they might not have been able to dodge that sword strike. However, Su Zimo possessed spirit perception and was unpredictable. The moment the flying sword was released, he had already dodged it. The flying sword spun in midair and transformed into a streak of light that returned to a cultivator of Heavenly Dipper sect. The person who attacked was perfected Lord Pang Lan. "Do you have a death wish?" Su Zimo glared at perfected Lord Pang Lan coldly. "Fufu." Perfected Lord Pang Lan smiled gently. "Yi Tiancheng is merely a brat who's still wet behind the ears. I don't take him seriously at all. Do you think that you're the #1 perfected lord just because you killed Yi Tiancheng?" Su Zimo no longer wanted to listen to perfected Lord Pang Lan's nonsense and walked straight towards him. A shuddering malevolent aura surged over. Perfected Lord Pang Lan felt as though he was not facing a cultivator, but an ancient demon whose hands were stained with endless blood. His heart skipped a beat. No matter what, the melee combat strength displayed by Su Zimo just now was still terrifying. He could not let the latter get close to him. "You're the one who has a death wish." Perfected Lord Pang Lan roared and his glabella shone, releasing an incomparably domineering power. His spirit consciousness surged and arrived. It was a spirit consciousness attack. This was an ability that cultivators possessed when they cultivated to the void reversion realm and their essence spirits improved and became more condensed, allowing them to leave their bodies and roam the world spiritually. Normally speaking, void reversions could crush nascent souls. Apart from the exponential increase in dermic powers, spirit consciousness attacks were also the most direct method that void reversions could use to suppress nascent souls. Not every void reversion knew of essence spirit secret skills. However, every void reversion could release spirit consciousness attacks. The crowd was in an uproar when they sensed the power fluctuation. Perfected Lord Pang Lan is able to release a spirit consciousness attack at perfected nascent soul realm. No wonder he doesn't take Yi Tiancheng seriously. So, that's his greatest trump card. No matter how terrifying Su Zimo's physique is or how strong he is in melee combat, he won't be able to defend against a spirit consciousness attack. As expected of the #1 of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago. He saw through Su Zimo's weakness with a single glance. Su Zimo is finished. Perfected Lord Pang Lan was excited when he heard the discussions around him. Yi Tiancheng. Su Zimo. From today onwards, they would all be his stepping stones. That's your trump card? Right then, Su Zimo's voice sounded calmly. Suddenly, perfected Lord Pang Lan felt uneasy. He could not see any panic or fear in Su Zimo's eyes. There was only calmness with a hint of mockery. Spirit consciousness attack. Su Zimo smirked and said slowly, "I know how to do that too." The moment he said that, his consciousness surged. The black-haired essence spirit stood in midair and his black hair danced as his body shone with crackling lightning. Sanskrit echoed in his consciousness. It was vast and sacred and lasted for a long time. The Purple Thunder Manual and Great Day Rulai Sutra were both top-tier cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist sects and were pushed to their limits. An even more terrifying spirit consciousness burst forth from Su Zimo's glabella and collided against perfected Lord Pang Lan's spirit consciousness attack. Boom! The two divine consciousnesses collided together, erupting with an earth-shattering bang. A series of ripples appeared in the void and surged in all directions, knocking the cultivators at the front to the ground. Perfected Lord Pang Lan's eyes were filled with endless shock and he was dumbfounded. He had not expected Su Zimo to be able to release a spirit consciousness attack as well. Furthermore, it was even more ferocious and terrifying than his spirit consciousness attack. Before long, Perfected Lord Pang Lan's spirit consciousness was shattered and dissipated instantly. The remnant spirit consciousness surged into Perfected Lord Pang Lan's consciousness. Chapter 961. Ah! Perfected Lord Pang Lan shuddered and cried out in pain. He hugged his head with both hands and curled his body, as though he was enduring immense pain. The crowd was in an uproar. If Perfected Lord Pang Lan's spirit consciousness attack was said to have shocked everyone, Su Zimo's counterattack was enough to shock everyone. Perfected Lord Pang Lan had cultivated for hundreds of years and was half a step into the void reversion realm. It was only logical that he could cultivate to this point. Su Zimo was only slightly more than 100 years old and was at late-stage nascent soul. How could his essence spirit be so terrifying? It was even condensed to the point where he could release spirit consciousness attacks. What was even more frightening was that Perfected Lord Pang Lan was clearly defeated in the spirit consciousness clash. In reality, when Su Zimo first entered the nascent soul realm, his two essence spirits could already release spirit consciousness attacks after fusing. By the time he cultivated to late-stage nascent soul, his two essence spirits were already condensed and pure enough without the need to fuse. The black-haired essence spirit cultivated two top-tier immortal and Buddhist spirit refinement cultivation techniques. Not only that, it was also nourished by Qinglian of creation. In Su Zimo's opinion, it was only normal that his spirit consciousness attack could crush Perfected Lord Pang Lan's spirit consciousness. Perfected Lord Pang Lan had a splitting headache and wounds had already appeared on his essence spirit. Essence spirit injuries were the hardest to heal. Suddenly, a strong sense of regret surged in his heart. He struggled to get to his feet. Unfortunately, Su Zimo would not give him another chance. After the spirit consciousness attack, Su Zimo's figure flashed and arrived before Perfected Lord Pang Lan in the blink of an eye. He extended his finger and tapped the latter's glabella gently. Poof! A bloody hole appeared on Perfected Lord Pang Lan's glabella. His essence spirit was completely destroyed. Another monster incarnate was dead. The number one of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago who was half a step into the void reversion realm died in front of everyone just like that. He died even faster than Yi Tiancheng. That was the danger of a spirit consciousness clash. Even if his primordial spirit hadn't been destroyed in the first instant, it would still have been jolted by the impact. If he hadn't been able to react in time, he might have been killed by the other party. Therefore, under most circumstances, it was rare for cultivators to use spirit consciousness attacks or essence spirit secret skills right from the start in a fight. This was equivalent to deciding life and death in an instant. No one had the confidence to win. Not to mention that even if he won, if his soul core suffered an injury, then it would leave behind boundless calamity, and the losses outweighed the gains. Two paragons, Yi Tiancheng and Perfected Lord Pang Lan, the former number one of the phenomenon ranking, died one after another. Suddenly, the mystic courtyard was filled with a strange killing intent. The gazes of the void reversions of Chaos Essence Sect, Heavenly Dipper Sect, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Sword Sect and Hellfire Hall met. The 5 void reversions were expressionless, but their spirit consciousnesses were secretly communicating. Su Zimo waved his hand and put away the mystic magnet mountain. At the same time, he also put away the 49 perfect grade Perfected Lord flying swords below. Unfortunately, he did not manage to obtain the storage bags of Yi Tiancheng and Perfected Lord Pang Lan. Yi Tiancheng's mysterious stone hammer was also put away by Chaos Essence Sect cultivators. Perfected Lord Pang Lan's Khanate Perfected Lord Flying Sword was in Su Zimo's hands instead. Su Zimo gave the flying sword to Ji Qingtian without hesitation. He had Qinglian of creation, and a dermic weapon like a flying sword would not increase his combat strength by much, he might as well give it to his best friend. That scene made many Jiningjinjuan envious once more. In that short period of time, Su Zimo had given away 2 Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapons and a cup of supreme-grade mystic tea. Any one of those items would cause many cultivators to be envious and fight for it. Ji Qingtian knew that dozens of years ago, he was hunted down by Diyin because of his relationship with Su Zimo and narrowly escaped death. Su Zimo felt guilty. Now that Su Zimo had returned, the Khanate dermic weapon was meant to make up for the guilt in his heart. Ji Qingtian pondered for a moment and did not decline. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to a monk leading the group of formless monastery of the Buddhist monasteries, and he said indifferently, "Hand it over." That was a void reversion monk with the dermic name of Xian Ming. The crowd was stunned. Everyone could not understand why Su Zimo would suddenly target the Buddhist monasteries. Right from the beginning, the monks of the Buddhist monasteries had been watching by the sidelines. Could it be that Su Zimo had reached the stage where he considered everyone beneath him? Monk Xian Ming lowered his gaze without looking at Su Zimo and asked, "Patron Su, what are you talking about? Are there monks like you in the Buddhist monasteries who are unclean?" Su Zimo scoffed coldly, his eyes filled with mockery. "Patron, watch your words. Who are you talking about? How have we, the monks of Formless Monastery, offended you?" Many monks of Formless Monastery glared at him. Su Zimo's expression turned cold as he glared at Monk Xian Ming and asked once more, "Monk, does that mean that you're trying to play dumb with me? Patron Su, please speak clearly." Monk Xian Ming was still expressionless and was neither anxious nor annoyed. Good, good, good." Su Zimo nodded. "Since you want to pretend, I'll let you suffer a little. Break." Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he hollered softly. "Xing." The cultivators were still confused. They heard the sound of clothes tearing and saw green rays of light bursting forth from beneath Monk Xian Ming's robes. A green lotus platform appeared and broke free from Monk Xian Ming's storage bag, revealing itself. The creation lotus platform. Everyone's mouths were agape as they gradually came to a realization. Just now, during the battle between Su Zimo and Yi Tiancheng, the creation Qinglian collided with the mysterious stone hammer. The creation Qinglian fell into the crowd, and before Su Zimo could retrieve it, Monk Xian Ming of Formless Monastery had hidden it. Poof! The creation Qinglian spun slowly and slashed open wounds on Monk Xian Ming's waist, causing blood to gush out. In the blink of an eye, his robes were stained. Monk Xian Ming grunted dully and retreated half a step. There was no way his body could defend against the power of the creation Qinglian. The creation Qinglian wanted to tear through the air and escape. However, Monk Xian Ming hurriedly summoned a wooden fish to suppress the creation Qinglian. Monk Xian Ming circulated his dermic powers and injected them into the wooden fish. The wooden fish shone brightly and pressed the creation Qinglian in midair, immobilizing it. "Monk, do you think that I can't sense it just because you added a seal on your storage bag?" Su Zimo sneered, "The creation Qinglian is my destiny dermic weapon and has been nurtured for 100 years. It's not something a monk with ill intentions like you can lay a finger on." Seeing that he could no longer pretend, Monk Xian Ming decided to go all out and said in a deep voice, "Junior, don't slander me. The creation Qinglian is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries to begin with. Since it has appeared, it should be returned to the Buddhist monasteries." This was completely twisting words and forcing logic. Dao Bing Yuding frowned and was about to step forward to persuade him when Su Zimo's expression darkened completely. He recalled the difference between immortals and fiends that Demoness Ji had mentioned. If someone from the fiend's sex took a liking to something, they would snatch it openly. As for those from the immortal sex, they would snatch it as well. However, they would frame those from the fiend's sex in secret. Right now, Not only did monk Xian Ming of the Buddhist monasteries want to snatch his creation Qinglian, he was even acting righteously. How dare you snatch something from me? Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he said slowly, you must be tired of living. Chapter 962. The cultivators were moved. Was he threatening a void reversion? After killing Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan consecutively, Su Zimo's combat strength had already conquered all the nascent soul paragons present. But now, everyone was shocked that Su Zimo would say something like that to a void reversion of the Buddhist monasteries. Isn't Su Zimo way too arrogant? To think that he's threatening a void reversion. He must be a little arrogant after killing 2 paragons consecutively and doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, given Su Zimo's combat strength, he should be able to challenge a void reversion who is a major cultivation realm above him. However, this is the successor of formless monastery of the Buddhist monasteries and not an ordinary void reversion. He has just gone through 2 huge battles and is mentally and physically exhausted. If he dares to provoke a void reversion at this moment, he's asking for humiliation. Boom! The ground trembled. As the cultivators discussed and questioned, Su Zimo had already attacked. He was no longer threatening the void reversion. Instead, he chose to attack the latter directly. The moment Su Zimo's feet landed on the ground, he charged forward and arrived before monk Xian Ming in the blink of an eye with a series of explosions behind him. Let go. With a flip of his palm, Su Zimo smashed down towards monk Xian Tian's head with a terrifying aura that blotted out the skies. How dare you? Back down. Of the 6 Buddhist monasteries, the 3 major monasteries of the Middle Continent were all present and stood together. When Hollow Monastery and Wisdom Monastery saw that monk Xian Ming was attacked, they hollered without hesitation and attacked one after another. Void Finger. Wisdom Palm. A finger and a palm strike came at him. Formless Dermic Seal. Monk Xian Ming harumphed coldly and conjured a Dermic Seal with both hands in an unhurried manner, smashing it towards Su Zimo. The 3 void reversion monks counterattacked at the same time with terrifying strength and torrential dermic powers with a terrifying might. Fufu, Su Zimo has a death wish. He can't blame anyone else. To think that you would dare to make the first move against a void reversion. Fufu, you're truly condescending and look down on all the heroes of the world. He probably did not expect that he would attract the counterattack of 3 void reversions himself. Some shook their heads, some sneered, some gloated, and some were worried. Master, are you still not going to make a move? Leng Ro abruptly turned around and looked at Arikatsuki Michinoku, questioning him loudly. Arikatsuki Michinoku's eyes flickered. Just as he was about to raise his hand, he pondered for a moment and closed his eyes. In the end, he did not interfere. This was equivalent to Arikatsuki Michinoku tacitly agreeing to the 3 void reversions attacking Su Zimo. The distance between Taoist Yuding and the Buddhist sect was rather far. It was a little too far for him to help at that moment. At this moment, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed. Dao Bing Chi Gai of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Void Reversions of Chaos Essence Sect, Sword Sect, Heavenly Dipper Sect and Hellfire Hall who were watching the battle not far away stood up at the same time. The 5 Void Reversions remained silent with cold expressions and rays of light shone from their glabella. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying spirit consciousness fluctuation burst forth and condensed into sabers, swords, spears and lances in midair, charging towards Su Zimo fiercely. In an instant, the void trembled, and ripples appeared. Pust. The expressions of the cultivators changed when they saw that. The 5 void reversions attacked at the same time. Furthermore, they did not probe at all. They did not get close to Su Zimo or even use any dermic arts. Instead, they released their essence spirit secret skills directly. A fatal blow. The Dao reversions attacked Jining Jinjuan and released their essence spirit secret skills. Furthermore, 5 void reversions attacked at the same time. This was equivalent to not giving Su Zimo any chance to survive or counterattack at all. They wanted him dead. It was a fatal blow. This was much more terrifying than the spirit consciousness attack released by perfected Lord Pang Lan just now. A single essence spirit secret skill was enough to wipe out perfected Lord Pang Lan's essence spirit, let alone 5 at the same time. The timing of the 5 void reversions was perfect. They had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. That was because there were 3 void reversions of the Buddhist monasteries in front of Su Zimo that attracted all of Su Zimo's attention. To be more precise, this was a sure death situation. 8 void reversions joining forces to kill a single nascent soul. This was probably the first time in history that something like this had happened. Fairy Luo Shui of Snowdrift Valley was enraged and stood up with a shocked expression. At that moment, it was already too late for her to help. The only person who could stop everything from happening was Arakatsuki Michinoku. However, at that moment, Arakatsuki Michinoku closed his eyes. The cultivators were silent when they saw that. So what if he was the number 1 perfected lord? As Arakatsuki Michinoku had said, one's sharpness was too strong and would eventually be killed. It was somewhat ironic at the thought of it. The 3 number 1s of the phenomenon ranking were all dead today. However, who would have thought that the once-in-a-thousand-years thousand crane tea party would turn into the burial ground of these monster incarnates? Just as the cultivators lamented internally, Su Zimo, who was in the center of the storm, had already retracted his palm. His gaze was as deep as the ocean and he was frighteningly calm. His black hair swayed without wind. In the blink of an eye, strands of scarlet hair were mixed in between his black hair. Su Zimo's eyes turned red and black as well. Crackle. The sound of bones growing could be heard from Su Zimo's body. His body began to expand and climb. A shuddering aura of destruction emanated from his body. It was savage and primordial, as though it came from the primordial era, with rumbling demonic chi and torrential ferocity. Su Zimo's clothes were torn and scarlet scales appeared on the surface of his skin, as though he was a piece of metal that was burned red by flames. His eyes were filled with killing intent, as though they were doors and windows that led to the 9 hells. Heavens, what kind of monster is that? Why can't I circulate my bloodline? What bloodline is flowing in that person's body? To think that it can suppress my bloodline? Is this a dragon? The voices of the cultivators trembled and their eyes were filled with endless fear. Fairy Luo Shui, Heng Qiuyu, and the others were shocked. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, they had personally witnessed Su Zimo transforming into a dragon and it was extremely shocking. It was also because of the burst of dragonification that Su Zimo was able to kill the Protoss completely. But now, Su Zimo was even more terrifying than the dragonified existence in Myriad Phenomenon City 100 years ago. Someone's about to die. Almost at the same time, Fairy Luo Shui, Heng Qiuyu, and the others murmured softly. In Su Zimo's consciousness, his 2 essence spirits had already fused into one. Since the 8 void reversions had attacked at the same time, he could not care less and could only fuse his essence spirits to defend against this fatal situation. The attacks of the 5 void reversions of Chaos Essence Sect, Sword Sect, Heavenly Dipper Sect, Zephyr Thunder Palace and Hellfire Palace ignited the killing intent in his heart. Since Arakatsuki Michinoku turned a blind eye to it, he couldn't blame him for going on a killing spree. Chapter 963. Although the 5 void reversions of Zephyr Thunder Palace and Chaos Essence Sect attacked later, the attacks of their Essence Spirit secret skills arrived instantly and were the first to arrive. After transforming into a dragon, Su Zimo channeled the Mingwang prayer beads right away. Buzz! A series of golden lights shone from Su Zimo's left wrist in a bedazzling manner that enveloped his entire body. In the blink of an eye, a shimmering golden barrier formed around him. Ancient and mysterious Sanskrit appeared on it in a flawless manner. Essence Spirit Dermic Weapon. The gazes of Dao being Qi Gai and the others narrowed. Among Dermic weapons, Essence Spirit Dermic weapons were the rarest. Furthermore, given their judgment, the dermic weapon on Su Zimo's wrist was of an extremely high grade and was a rare utmost treasure for them as well. A look of greed flashed through the eyes of the five of them. Su Zimo truly had way too many treasures on him. After killing this lad, there would definitely be a fierce battle to snatch his treasures. Creation Qinglian had already fallen into the hands of the Buddhist monasteries. They had to snatch the remaining treasures. Bang! 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 The moment the golden barrier was formed, the spirit consciousnesses of 5 essence spirit secret skills had already descended. If they were any slower, Su Zimo would have been killed by the 5 spirit consciousnesses. The golden barrier trembled continuously and the Sanskrit dimmed. The two powers were only in a stalemate for a moment before the golden barrier shattered. However, the power of the 5 spirit consciousnesses had already been reduced by more than half. Swoosh! The 5 remnant spirit consciousnesses entered Su Zimo's glabella instantly. When they saw that, the 5 void reversions sneered internally. So what if he had an essence spirit dermic weapon? This lad's cultivation realm was insufficient after all, and he could not unleash the true power of the essence spirit dermic weapon. Furthermore, this was an essence spirit secret skill released by the 5 of them together. Even if most of the power was blocked by the essence spirit dermic weapon, the remaining spirit consciousnesses were enough to kill Su Zimo when they surged into his consciousness. The 5 spirit consciousnesses barged into Su Zimo's consciousness and caused a series of raging waves that surged towards Su Zimo's essence spirit. Although Creation Qinglian was still in the hands of monk Xian Ming of the Buddhist monasteries, the 45 lotus seeds circled Su Zimo's essence spirit without leaving. Creation Qinglian could not defend against spirit consciousnesses. However, Son of Qinglian was an essence spirit dermic weapon. Su Zimo's essence spirit secret to the essence spirit, Su Zimo's essence spirit, emitting a terrifying sharp aura chi spirit. The moment the 5 spirit consciousnesses descended, they were sliced into pieces by the 45 lotus seeds and their powers were almost completely dissipated. Zimo Su Zimo's essence spirit dermic weapon spirit, Su Zimo Zimo, to the Zimo. At the same time, the attacks of the 3 void reversions of the Buddhist monasteries had already arrived. At that moment, Su Zimo had just defended against the attacks of the 5 spirit consciousnesses. It was already too late for him to raise his hand to defend against the attacks of the 3 void reversions. Unless the 3 void reversions paused for a moment to give him time to react. However, that was impossible. Xiankong Temple and Sanskrit Temple's 2 great monks sighed inwardly, unable to bear it any longer, even holding back slightly. As for monk Xian Ming of Formless Monastery, he knew that he was in the wrong for snatching Su Zimo's Creation Qinglian. The Creation Qinglian would only be ownerless if Su Zimo was killed. The moment that thought flashed through his mind, monk Xian Ming's eyes flashed coldly and the unparalleled dermic seals conjured by his hands became even more ferocious. Right then, Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar. Roar! The world shook. The roar was mighty and powerful, piercing through metal and rocks with an ancient aura. It was filled with endless fury, as though it wanted to bring down the stars. That was not the voice of a human. It was a dragon's roar. Silence reigned. After the dragon's roar sounded, it was as though the world had gone silent. Given Su Zimo's blood qi, the lethality of the dragon's roar was extremely terrifying. The first to bear the brunt of it were the 3 void reversions of the Buddhist monasteries. The 3 of them shuddered as though they were struck by lightning. Their eyes widened and their minds went blank for a brief moment. Void Finger and Wisdom Palm paused for a moment. Monk Xianming's formless dermic seal was nearly shattered by that roar. The fact that the 3 of them could bring their nascent soul paragons here meant that their strength was naturally not to be underestimated. If it was any other void reversion, their souls would have been destroyed by that roar. However, for Su Zimo, that brief pause was enough. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and his blood qi surged. He threw 3 punches at the 3 void reversions of the Buddhist monasteries at lightning speed. Bang! 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 Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Even void reversion monks could not defend against Su Zimo's body. Furthermore, that was the power released by channeling his blood chi with all his might after dragonification. It could be said to be destructive. The void finger of the void reversion monk of Hollow Monastery was shattered by Su Zimo's punch and his entire palm was smashed into meat paste. The outcome of the void reversion monk of Wisdom Monastery was almost the same. The moment the wisdom palm descended, it was smashed into smithereens by Su Zimo's punch. The bones in his entire arm were broken and he was completely crippled. The 2 void reversion monks cried out in pain as their faces turned pale. They fell back heavily into the crowd in a wretched manner. That was even after Su Zimo showed mercy. Although he had transformed into a dragon, he had not lost his mind. Just now, the 2 void reversion monks were compassionate and saved themselves unknowingly by restraining their strength. Su Zimo was decisive in killing, but he was not bloodthirsty. What he wanted was to have a clear mind and take revenge as he pleased. He only killed people who deserved to be killed. Monk Xian Ming was someone who deserved to be killed. Su Zimo threw 3 punches in succession, 2 of them towards the void finger and wisdom palm of the 2 monks. The 3rd punch landed on Monk Xian Ming's head. Poof! Monk Xian Ming's head was shattered and his essence spirit was destroyed. He was shocked by the dragon roar and could not react at all. Without any way of resisting, he was killed by a single punch. The crowd was shocked. Changes happened instantly on the battlefield. Nobody expected that the outcome of 8 void reversions attacking at the same time would cause 2 of them to be severely injured and 1 to die on the spot. How was that possible? Even the essence spirit secret skills of 5 void reversions could not kill this person. How did this person still have the strength to retaliate? That was not only the confusion of the crowd, but also the confusion of the 5 void reversions of Zephyr Thunder Palace and Chaos Essence Sect. The 5 of them were also shocked by the dragon roar. However, they reacted quickly. Immediately after, the 5 of them were bewildered and their eyes shone with endless confusion. Su Zimo severely injured the 2 void reversions of Hollow Monastery and Wisdom Monastery with 2 punches and killed Monk Xian Ming with a single punch. Without stopping, he pressed down with his palm and snatched back Creation Qinglian. The 5 of you, hand over your lives. Su Zimo turned around suddenly and glared at Dao Bing Qi Gai and the other 4. He grinned and exuded a torrential killing intent, resembling a god of massacre that had walked out of the 9 hells. Chapter 964. Su Zimo injected dermic powers in reverse and tossed Creation Qinglian out. Creation Qinglian transformed into a streak of light and sped towards the void reversion of Chaos Essence Sect, arriving instantly. Boom! In a flash, Su Zimo charged towards Dao Bing Qi Gai and the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper Sect, causing sand and rocks to fly everywhere he passed. In midair, Su Zimo condensed a sword finger and touched his glabella gently, pointing in the direction of the void reversion of Sword Sect. Whoosh! 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 45 green beams of light burst forth from his glabella and pierced towards the void reversion of Sword Sect. Those were 45 sons of Qinglian. Instantly, all of them exploded. At the same time, Su Zimo conjured hand seals and 2 balls of flames with different colors and auras condensed in his palms. One was scarlet red and the other was golden. Immortal Dao Fire, Buddhist Dao Fire. In his consciousness, his essence spirit was already pushed to its limits. Dermic powers surged into the 2 balls of Dao Fire endlessly. Condense. Su Zimo approached the 2 balls of flames and channeled a supreme secret skill, fusing them together to form a dual-colored Dao Fire. Samadhi Dao Fire. Nangong Ling, Yu Hanyun and Ru Xian widened their eyes and almost exclaimed. In the entire mystic courtyard, there were very few cultivators who could recognize this dharmic art. The three of them were legacy disciples of Tao Lord Scarlet Star and were naturally cultivating the Samadhi Tao fire as well. However, they had yet to succeed. In their opinion, the secret skill Su Zimo used was the Samadhi Tao fire. However, there were still some differences from the Samadhi Tao fire in their memories. The greatest difference was that the Samadhi Tao fire had 3 balls of flames. However, Su Zimo only condensed 2 balls. Furthermore, in the Samadhi Tao fire that they cultivated, every Tao fire had the same color. They were all scarlet red and there were no golden flames at all. What truly shocked the 3 of them was that although there were only 2 balls of Tao fire in Su Zimo's palms, however, the Tao fire formed from the fusion of these 2 Tao fires seemed to be even more terrifying than the Samadhi Tao fire in their impression. The 3 of them did not know that the nature of the Samadhi Tao fire had completely changed in Su Zimo's hands. The original meaning of Samadhi was the Samadhi of essence, chi, and spirit. However, when it came to Su Zimo, he interpreted it as the Samadhi of immortals, Buddhas, and devils. This kind of understanding had more than doubled the realm and layout of this spell. The original Samadhi Tao fire was the top spell in the Red Flame Heart Sutra, and it was also one of Hakka Dojin's trump cards. Su Zimo's Samadhi Tao fire raised this Dharma spell to a whole new level. No one had ever seen its might before, and no one could imagine it. Therefore, even though Su Zimo did not condense the true Samadhi Tao fire and merely fuse the Tao fires of the immortal and Buddhist sects together, its power was still rather terrifying. Go! Su Zimo scolded softly. The ball of Dvyadi Tao fire floated towards the void reversion of Hellfire Hall. At that moment, Su Zimo had already arrived before Tao being Chi Gai and the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect. He extended his palm and enveloped the 2 of them. It was peerlessly terrifying. The crowd of cultivators widened their eyes in fear and shock. Initially, Tao Bing Yuding wanted to help. However, at that moment, he realized that he did not know where to start. Fairy Luo Shui stood up initially, wanting to help Su Zimo. However, at that moment, she sat back down slowly. Nobody could have imagined that such a fatal situation could be resolved by Su Zimo, who was at the nascent soul realm. Furthermore, his counterattack was so ferocious and terrifying that it was suffocating. After Su Zimo severely injured the 2 void reversions and killed monk Xian Ming, he fought against 5 alone. The 5 void reversions were all within his attack range. That was the boldness of the number 1 perfected lord. That was the method of the number 1 perfected lord. There was no such thing as fighting one-on-one. Since they were going to fight, none of the 5 void reversions could escape. The first to make contact was the void reversion of Chaos Essence sect. When he saw the creation Qinglian attacking, the void reversion of Chaos Essence sect did not dare to be careless. He swiped his storage bag and summoned a gigantic silver shield to block in front of him. After injecting dharmic powers, the shield's aura expanded. Whoosh! 4 bedazzling lights shone on the silver shield. A supreme-grade Tao Being dharmic weapon. According to his plan, he would first defend against the creation Qinglian's attack. It would be best if he could capture the creation Qinglian before counterattacking. However, he had truly underestimated the creation Qinglian and Su Zimo's strength. This was the grade 5 creation Qinglian and its power was comparable to a Khanate Tao Being dharmic weapon. His shield could not defend against it at all. Furthermore, the creation Qinglian was Su Zimo's destiny dharmic weapon and was even stronger. It was thrown out by Su Zimo with all his strength. This explosion was no different from a meteor crashing. Boom! The creation Qinglian collided with the silver shield and let out a deafening bang. The void reversion of Chaos Essence sect's expression changed starkly. When he sensed the power of the collision, he suddenly realized that something was amiss. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Without pausing, the silver shield exploded and the creation Qinglian charged straight in, charging towards the void reversion of Chaos Essence sect. Ah! He only had time to yell before his head was smashed into pieces by the creation Green Lotus. His essence spirit was destroyed on the spot before it could escape. Against this attack, if he had chosen to summon his destiny dermic weapon right away to defend with all his might, he might have had a chance of survival. Unfortunately, not only did he underestimate the creation Qinglian, he also underestimated Su Zimo. He was still thinking of counterattacking, but he did not know that the scythe of death was hanging over his neck. A single mistake and he would die. The moment the void reversion of Chaos Essence sect died, Su Zimo's other attack had already descended. 45 lotus seeds were densely packed and stabbed towards the void reversion of Sword sect, sealing off all his escape routes. Initially, the void reversion of Sword sect wanted to throw out a few talismans to defend against the attack of the lotus seeds. However, from the corner of his eye, he could not help but be shocked when he saw the void reversion of Chaos Essence sect die. On second thought, the void reversion of Sword sect had a grim expression and did not dare to be careless. As he tore apart a few defensive talismans, he summoned his destiny dermic weapon right away. Buzz! The sword in his hand trembled and let out a clear sword hum. It was a perfect Dao being dermic weapon. This sword had followed him for many years and was tempered with his essence spirit for thousands of years. It was extremely powerful. He believed that even if the true creation Qinglian attacked, he would be able to defend against it with this sword, let alone these 45 lotus seeds. He did not seem to move much and merely flicked his wrist gently. A series of resplendent and cold sword lights burst forth and formed sword chi barriers around him. Cling! Clang! The sword chi barrier was impenetrable and blocked all 45 lotus seeds outside. Everyone's eyes lit up. As expected of a sword sect cultivator. This sword technique was truly incomparably stunning. A single slash was enough to dispel Su Zimo's killing move. Right then, Hang Qiuyu seemed to have sensed something as his pupils constricted violently and he exclaimed, "Senior brother, watch out." Chapter 965. Be careful, senior brother. The void reversion of Sword sect sneered internally when he heard Hang Qiuyu's warning. With the advantage of his destiny dermic weapon and the might of his sect's sword art, he had already blocked all 45 lotus seeds. The few talismans that he tore were unnecessary. What was there to be careful about? The moment that thought crossed his mind, his expression changed starkly. Something was not right. Although the 45 lotus seeds were chopped down, the lotus seeds emitted rays of green light that penetrated his sword chi barrier, penetrated his talisman defense, and surged into his sea of consciousness. Qinglian's sun was an essence spirit dermic weapon. Although the sword light talisman could block the main body of the lotus seeds, it could not block the killing power of the spirit consciousness released by the lotus seeds. By the time the void reversion of Sword sect sensed it, it was already too late. Poof! 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 45 beams of light surged into his consciousness and pierced his essence spirit instantly like thousands of arrows. Clang! The sword fell and the talisman dissipated. The void reversion of Sword sect's gaze was unfocused and there were no wounds on his body. However, there was no life force in his body as he collapsed stiffly. That was a killing move that targeted the essence spirit. Although he looked unscathed on the surface, his essence spirit was destroyed and he was dead. Many Sword sect cultivators were shocked and they saw the void reversion of their sect fall. They retreated with pale faces. Only Hang Qiuyu stood at the front with a conflicted expression and sighed deeply. In some ways, he was lucky. He had witnessed Su Zimo's methods. Therefore, he felt fear in his heart. He would not take any chances and would not try to challenge that person again. However, many people had not seen it before. Therefore, many people wanted to kill this monster incarnate. However, none of them saw how many corpses were piled beneath the monster incarnate's feet. Which of those corpses were not paragons when they were alive? Without fighting that person, they would never be able to experience that suffocating fear. Hang Qiuyu did not want to experience it anymore. He sighed and put away the corpse of the void reversion of his sect. The only thing he could do was not take revenge, but return to the sect and bury him properly. That was all. On the battlefield. Although it took a long time to describe, all of this happened in the blink of an eye. Now that the two void reversions were dead, the Dviati Dao fire that Su Zimo condensed had already floated in front of the void reversion of Hellfire Hall. He hesitated. When he saw Su Zimo condense Dao fire and attack him, his first reaction was disdain. He was afraid of Su Zimo's corporeal body and was afraid of fighting Su Zimo in close combat, but he wasn't afraid of fighting with magical powers. After all, the difference in their primordial spirits was an entire realm, and the difference in their dermic powers was several times greater. Such a gap was simply impossible to make up for. Therefore, he also formed a spell and prepared to counterattack with the nether fire. However, right after, he saw the two void reversions of Chaos Essence Sect and Sword Sect die. This caused his mind to be greatly shaken, and he almost turned around to flee. Soon, he calmed down. The death of the two void reversions of Primordial Chaos Sect and Sword Sect was mainly due to Qinglian's power. But now, there was no need for him to fear this fire-type spell. Furthermore, he had already conjured his dermic art in front of everyone. If he turned around and fled, he would definitely become a laughing stock. At that thought, he made the worst decision of his life. It was also his final decision. How dare you embarrass yourself with such petty tricks? The void reversion of Hellfire Hall sneered and conjured a ball of nether fire in his hands. It emitted a sinister aura and collided with the incoming Dao fire. There was no intense collision as he had imagined. Shing! Almost instantly, his nether fire was extinguished as if it had encountered some terrifying force. After Su Zimo's two essence spirits fused, his essence spirit was no longer weaker than a void reversion's essence spirit. In fact, it was even stronger. The Buddhist Dao fire alone was enough to suppress the nether fire. Furthermore, it was the Dviati Dao fire formed by the immortal and Buddhist sects. It was almost a complete suppression. Swoosh! Under the widened eyes of the void reversion of Hellfire Hall, the dual-colored Dao fire surged over and engulfed him, burning him furiously. Ah! Hysterical screams could be heard coming from the flames. It lasted for less than 2 to 3 breaths before it went silent. The flames gradually extinguished and dust fell. That might be the only trace left behind by the void reversion of Hellfire Hall. The power of the Dviati Dao fire was so terrifying that it burned a void reversion to ashes. In the blink of an eye, 3 of the 5 void reversions were dead. The entire process was so short that Su Zimo arrived before Dao being Qi Gai and the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect. The moment he attacked, he enveloped the 2 of them. Just as the 2 of them were about to join forces to hold on for a moment, they realized that the 3 void reversions of Sword Sect were already dead. This scene caused the 2 of them to be greatly shocked. Before they attacked, they were certain that they could not engage in melee combat with Su Zimo. Right now, the 2 of them were only inches away from Su Zimo. It was equivalent to them taking half a step into the gates of hell. Ah! The void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect roared and prepared to fight to the death. Su Zimo turned his head slightly and glared at him. Suddenly, his right eye turned white and shone with a faint light. It was extremely strange. Suddenly, the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect felt his heart skip a beat. Before he could react, a bedazzling beam of light burst forth from Su Zimo's right eye. It emitted a scorching aura and entered the head of the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect instantly. All his energy was focused on defending against Su Zimo's melee combat. He did not expect this turn of events. Poof! The head of the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect was penetrated by the blazing beam of light and his essence spirit was destroyed. He was deader than dead. The illumination dragon eye killed another person. In the blink of an eye, Dao being Chi Gai was the only one left. When he sensed Su Zimo's palm descending in an overwhelming manner and that even the void reversion of Heavenly Dipper sect beside him was dead, he was scared out of his wits. Even if he had 500 kilograms of strength, he could not lift it at all. Dao being Chi Gai's mind was blank and all that was left was a strong desire to survive. His eyes were filled with fear as he shouted instinctively. Perfected Lord, spare me. Against Su Zimo, he was scared out of his wits. Swoosh! The palm that seemed like it could destroy the world suddenly stopped. It hovered above his head motionlessly. When the cultivators saw that, they felt an unimaginable shock. That was a void reversion of Zephyr Thunder Palace. To think that he would end up begging for mercy under the palm of a Jinying Jinjuan. Su Zimo looked at the person quietly with an indifferent expression. He smirked and asked mockingly, "Spare me?" Dao being Chi Gai's face was pale as he nodded repeatedly. When he sensed the killing intent emanating from Su Zimo, it was a bloodline aura that seemed to have originated from the primordial era. His lips trembled and he was so scared that he could not speak. "It's too late," sighing faintly, Su Zimo slapped down. Piak! Dao being Chi Gai's expression froze and his eyes widened. Streaks of blood appeared on his face. His head had been smashed into pieces by this palm. His essence spirit was shattered into pieces and he died on the spot. In the blink of an eye, all 5 void reversions were killed without exception. Chapter 966. The gigantic mystic courtyard was silent. The cultivators looked at the messy battlefield in a daze. They looked at the tall and terrifying figure in the middle of the battlefield and forgot to breathe for a moment. If the cultivators had not witnessed such an outcome personally, who would have believed it? The nascent soul paragon of Snowdrift Valley, Ling Bai, was dumbfounded. His eyes were filled with shock and the only thing left in his mind was what Fairy Luo Shui had said just now. Since he was here, there was nothing to fear at the Thousand Crane Tea Party unless the Dharma Dao Jun appeared. His prophecy came true. The encirclement of 8 void reversions was destroyed by this person with ease. 6 void reversions died and 2 were severely injured. This was the number 1 perfected lord. Amidst their shock, Nangong Ling, Yuhan Yun and Ru Xian suddenly thought of something. Back then, they were in danger outside Wind Cloud City and were kidnapped by the Dharma Dao Jun of Hellfire Hall and 7 void reversions. Thereafter, they returned safely. Initially, the 3 of them thought that it was done by some peerless expert. But now, it seemed like that peerless expert was most likely Su Zimo. Su Zimo is truly a fiend demon. That's right. He's completely exposed and can't hide it any longer. What fiend demon is that? Just now, why didn't the demon revealing mirror reflect his true form? Gradually, whispers began to spread from the crowd. Instinctively, the cultivators looked at the Chiguramon patriarch, Arikatsuki Michinoku, at the top. At that moment, Arikatsuki Michinoku's expression was extremely terrible. Just now, 8 void reversions attacked at the same time. However, she chose to ignore them and watch from the sidelines. In fact, she even closed her eyes. She had it all planned out. Su Zimo had already offended many super sects and the only one backing him was the declining 100 Refinements sect. The 100 Refinements sect could not even protect themselves, so how could they protect Su Zimo? Even if Su Zimo fell here, it was nothing. No one would find trouble with her, and Chiguramon would not be implicated. That way, there would be an explanation for the deaths of Yi Tiancheng, perfected Lord Pang Lan and the others. However, not long after she closed her eyes, she heard an ancient howl that shook the heavens and earth. Even her mind began to waver. Dragon roar. Arikatsuki Michinoku froze for a moment, unable to react. Inside this mystic courtyard, why would there be a dragon roar sounding out? She instinctively opened her eyes and saw this scene. 2 Void Reversion Realm monks of the Buddhist sect had fallen with heavy injuries and monk Xian Ming had died. The Void Reversions of Chaos Essence Sect, Sword Sect and Hellfire Hall had just died as well. A tall and muscular body that emitted a terrifying aura had already arrived before Dao Being Chi Gai and the Void Reversion of Sword Sect. Dragons? Arikatsuki Michinoku's heart skipped a beat. Although the tall figure before her did not take on the form of dragons, the aura he exuded was no different from dragons. That single delay caused the Void Reversion of Sword Sect to die and be killed by the Illumination Dragon Eye. Immediately after, Dao Being Chi Gai was killed by this person as well. It was only at that moment that Arikatsuki Michinoku realized that the tall figure with dragon scales and red and black eyes was Su Zimo. It was too late. In the blink of an eye, the battle was over and the dust had settled. Arikatsuki Michinoku stood up slowly and exuded an extremely powerful might that suppressed over. She summoned the demon revealing mirror in reverse. Whoosh! A pillar of light shone down and enveloped Su Zimo. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and his 2 essence spirits separated. The scarlet-haired Een spirit hid and the black-haired essence spirit continued to guard his consciousness. Crackle! In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo returned to normal and turned into that handsome cultivator with clear, pitch-black eyes. Even though he was enveloped by the demon-revealing mirror, his expression was indifferent. This change made Arikatsuki Michinoku feel like she was being toyed with. Her expression had completely darkened. Su Zimo, I don't care if you're a human or a demon. If you dare to kill at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, it's equivalent to Patriarch. Before Arikatsuki Michinoku could finish, she was interrupted by Su Zimo. Everyone present can see the reason why I killed. Everyone has their own opinions on what's right and wrong. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo continued, furthermore, this conflict could have been avoided. Since someone turned a blind eye and stood by idly, don't blame me for starting a massacre. Are you blaming me? Arikatsuki Michinoku narrowed her gaze and asked murderously with a frosty expression. Her patience had already been exhausted. For the 1,000 Crane Tea Party to develop to such an extent, it could be considered a complete failure. However, the root of this failure pointed to a single person. It was Su Zimo before her. I can't say that I'm blaming you. However, I do have something to say to Patriarch. Su Zimo glanced at Leng Ro beside him and nodded before raising his voice. Patriarch Lanyue, it's fine if you want to make use of the marriage alliance to befriend Chaos Essence Sect and obtain their support. However, you should at least respect Leng Ro's intentions. What did you say? Arikatsuki Michinoku hollered guiltily. It was one thing for everyone to know that this was not honorable. However, it was another thing for him to say it in public. None of the cultivators present are fools. Who can't tell what Patriarch is thinking? Su Zimo said indifferently, Leng Ro is a disciple of the Chiguramon and it's not wrong for her to be your disciple. However, you have no right to decide Leng Ro's future. You're pushing her into a pit of fire. Leng Ro looked at Su Zimo and the coldness in her eyes dissipated. She knew that Su Zimo was speaking up for her and standing up for her. Those words were from the bottom of her heart but she did not dare to say them out loud. Leng Ro could not imagine what would have happened to her if not for Su Zimo. Su Zimo shook his head and smiled mockingly. Furthermore, the facts have proven that you have poor taste. Yi Tiancheng is not an impressive monster incarnate either. I've already killed him. The reason why you're interested in Chaos Essence Sect is because of the 2 paragons that rose in this generation. Now that one of them is dead, the other won't live for long either. Su Zimo, let's see how long more you can be arrogant. A perfected lord of Chaos Essence Sect stood out and said in a deep voice. Patriarch of Lanyue, Su Zimo is no doubt a fiend demon. He massacred human cultivators wantonly at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party. If you don't give us an explanation, the immortal sects will definitely not let this matter rest. Perfected Lord Sword Formation mustered his courage and declared loudly, "I've already released the messenger spirit Crane. Once Sword Sect receives the news, the Dharma Dao Jun will definitely descend personally. At that time, let's see how the Chiguramon will explain themselves." That's right. The Perfected Lord of Heavenly Dipper Sect grit his teeth. Dharma characteristic experts of our sect will rush over immediately as well. "Master, you can't." Leng Ro said hurriedly, "There's nothing unusual about Su Zimo under the demon revealing mirror. He's a human. Just now, it might just be a secret skill that he's cultivating. Furthermore, he's not to blame for this at all." Fairy Luo Shui stood out as well and cupped her fists. "Patriarch of Lanyue, don't forget that Chiguramon owes Su Zimo a huge favor in Myriad Phenomenon City 100 years ago." Arikatsuki Michinoku's gaze was cold and she remained silent. The cultivators glanced sideways, waiting for her attitude. Her attitude would determine Su Zimo's life and death. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.